Chapter 278. It was late at night. Juliana locked herself in her room. She had just taken a shower. Her hair was still wet, and her body exuded the fragrance of a shower. Lying on the bed, the perfect curves of her breasts were exposed. Juliana closed her eyes, but she did not fall asleep. Her eyelashes kept trembling, and her mind was spinning rapidly. This was a habit that Juliana had developed over the years. Only in this way could she think well. After thinking for a long time, she still had no clue. The matter of the material channel was like a big stone that pressed down on Juliana's heart, making her extremely depressed. She immediately got up, opened the door, and wanted to go out for a walk. The night breeze blew, and Juliana felt the coldness from her body. She tightened her pajamas. When she came to the corner, she saw a familiar figure. Sir Special Envoy? Alpha turned around. His head and shoulders were covered with dew. It seemed that he had been waiting for a long time. Miss. Alpha's eyes showed a trace of passion. He quickly walked up and wanted to hold Juliana in his arms. Juliana pushed him away. What? Alpha was a little stunned. Wasn't everything fine 2 days ago? Why did the miss seem to have a change of temperament when she came back? Juliana sobered up a little. Looking at Alpha, she bit her lower lip and said, I'm sorry. I seem to have told you before. If there is no restoration of the country, I will not consider the matter between us. Juliana still had love for Alpha. However, she knew in her heart that it was more of using him. Alpha's grandmother was a strong person in the sacred domain of the Roland Empire. She wanted to get help from Alpha, but unfortunately, it was not very effective. Juliana knew in her heart that Alpha had helped her a lot. The material channel was something that he had facilitated. The Miss family had great influence in the Roland Empire. Even His Majesty Nikolai was a little afraid of them. Alpha seemed to have been doused with cold water. He sighed softly. Juliana, is restoring the country so important to you? It is that important. Juliana looked up at him and said, looking at the depressed Alpha, she could not help but say, can't you tell your grandmother? After all, you are her favorite grandson. Alpha could only smile bitterly at Juliana's words. He said, Juliana, you'd better wake up. Juliana was silent. She also knew that it was impossible. No one could command a strong person in the sacred domain unless she was willing. Juliana did not think that she had enough face to make Ms. go against the Holy See. Alpha did not have that much face. Feeling that restoring the country was still far away, Juliana sighed softly in her heart. She gently hugged Alpha and then released him. She said, I'm sleepy. You should go to sleep too. Alpha treated Juliana sincerely. He also knew that she was using him. However, what made Alpha depressed was that he did not have the strength to help Juliana. Sleep early. Alpha sighed softly and said. He turned and left. Looking at Alpha's back, Juliana's expression was complicated. At this moment, in a corner in the darkness, a jealous gaze slightly raised. Lachlan clenched his fists tightly, his handsome face distorted with anger. Juliana did not notice Lachlan. She shook her head helplessly and turned to walk in the other direction. Juliana came to the door of Catherine's room. Just as she was about to knock on the door, she heard the sound of sobbing behind the door. Her hand stopped in midair. After hesitating for a moment, Juliana decided to go in. She reached out and pushed the door open and walked in. Catherine was lying on the desk, sobbing softly. When she saw her sister come in, she raised her tear-stained face and looked at her, then lowered her head again. Catherine, Juliana reluctantly squeezed out a smile and quickly walked over. Seeing Catherine lying on the desk, crying sadly, her heart couldn't bear it. Juliana gently touched the slightly curly hair behind her head and asked softly, did he agree? Catherine cried, buried her head in her arms, and gently nodded. Really? Juliana's face was filled with joy. She originally wanted to use the student matter to pressure Ron to comply. Unfortunately, Ron didn't buy it. She had no choice but to try and let Catherine persuade Ron. Unexpectedly, her sister actually succeeded. At this moment, Catherine raised her head and said with a sobbing tone, Ron agreed, but he will never talk to me again. With that, Catherine couldn't bear it anymore. She threw herself into her sister's arms and burst into tears. This is the last time. Juliana hugged her sister and stroked her hair. She sighed softly in her heart. She could imagine that Ron must have said this. After this time, he and Catherine would no longer be friends. Although some things weren't said, Catherine understood. No wonder she cried so sadly. Friendship couldn't be overdrawn. Once it was overdrawn, one would have to bear the consequences of losing their friendship. Juliana understood that Ron didn't owe them anything in this matter. Catherine, don't cry. Juliana's heart suddenly moved as if she understood something. She turned Catherine's body around and reached out to wipe the tears from the corner of her eyes. She stared into her eyes and asked, "Catherine, have you fallen for him?" Catherine sobbed softly. Her eyes were red like peaches from crying, but she still gently nodded her head. Juliana's heart seemed to have been struck by something as tears gushed out of her eyes. I'm sorry. Her voice trembled as she kept apologizing. Suddenly, Juliana felt that she owed Catherine too much. Some things didn't need her sister's tender shoulders to bear. Her sister clearly knew that she was using Ron, but she still did it without any hesitation. Forget it. Catherine stopped crying and sighed deeply. She wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and forced a smile. I've thought it through. Everything should be for the sake of reviving our country. Since Ron has agreed, then he will definitely do his best to help us. But perhaps from now on, he won't meet me again. Even if we meet, he won't care about me. I know that he must hate me to death. Sister, I understand. You said that there's a price to pay for everything. Perhaps this is the price that I should pay. Juliana's eyes were moist again. All these years, when had she ever paid a small price? It could be said that other than her body, she had handed over everything that could be handed over. If someone was willing to help her revive her country, she wouldn't mind handing over herself as well. Catherine, I promise you, I'll definitely find you the best husband in the entire continent. Juliana said affectionately. Sister, what are you talking about? Catherine was a little bashful. I'll plan my own marriage. But you? All right, sister, what's going on between you and that special envoy from the Roland Empire? Catherine countered her sister's words. This, Juliana smiled. You can tell too? Nonsense. Look at that lecherous look on his face. Who can't tell? Catherine giggled. She stopped and thought carefully. But he seems to be quite outstanding. Juliana nodded. Yes, he was born in a powerful family in the sacred domain. He's already a master at such a young age. But unfortunately, he can't control Mizfar's saint. In other words, he can only help me up to this point. As for reviving my country, I'll have to think of another way. In a magnificent room, Tommy was anxiously waiting. He was so anxiously waiting for someone who could decide his fate. At this moment, there was a cough, and a tall figure appeared at the door. It was the Lord of the Holy Sea's Hall of Piety, Commander Wharton of Guangming. He walked in with a serious face. Father. Tommy quickly walked up to greet him. In fact, Tommy was Wharton's illegitimate son. His mother was a maid. Although she was born in a humble family, she had a pretty face. When Wharton was drunk, some things happened very naturally. Wharton raped Tommy's mother. But for Wharton, who was a powerful person in the sacred domain, this was obviously nothing. Later, the maid found out that she was pregnant and gave birth to Tommy. Because he was born out of wedlock, the maid and her son were subjected to pornographic novels. After all the humiliation, Wharton finally found out about this by chance. After all, blood was thicker than water. Wharton quickly acknowledged him publicly and treated this illegitimate son like any other son. Tommy also worked hard. Although he was not very strong, he was very smart and quickly embarked on the path of politics. When Tommy learned that his father was actually a powerful person in the sacred domain, Wharton, he could hardly believe his ears. It was not until Wharton publicly acknowledged his existence that he became a noble from a servant. In terms of status, he was not inferior to any prince. Wharton glanced at him, his face expressionless. He then asked, "How's the matter between you and Omega?" Replying to father, "It's going well. I believe you will soon see us get engaged." Tommy replied respectfully. He always had respect for this father that he had never met before. To be honest, He was extremely unwilling to marry such an ugly Beaumont woman like Omega. However, after seeing her strength, he immediately changed his mind. He realized that this was an opportunity for him. Although Omega was ugly, not everyone had the fortune to marry her. That day, Omega and her father came to visit to discuss the marriage. Wharton called all his sons back and let Omega choose for herself. However, the result was shocking. Tommy clearly remembered that among all the outstanding sons of Wharton, Omega had taken a liking to him, the weakest illegitimate son. Just like that, Tommy's fate changed again. He became the most valued of Wharton's 7 or 8 sons. Tommy could foresee that after Omega became an adult, she would become a magical beast of the sacred domain. His status would rise again, and it would not be impossible for him to be on the same level as his father. Chapter 279. By the way, why are you looking for me? At this time, Wharton finally got to the main topic. Webb, father, Tommy said anxiously. I met Ron. The Ron wanted by the Vatican. Ron. Wharton was still expressionless as he asked, so what? In fact, he had already received the news. He defeated Omega. What? At this time, the expression on Wharton's face finally changed. Ron defeated Omega? How is that possible? After listening to Tommy's story, Wharton suddenly felt that the situation was serious. Defeating Omega meant that Ron already had the strength of a master. Father, Diallo didn't kill Ron at all. He lied, Tommy said indignantly. Wharton's face darkened and said, Diallo didn't have to lie. Wharton still appreciated Diallo for risking his life to complete this task. After all, he was also his right-hand man. Perhaps he didn't have time to check if Ron was really dead. Seeing that his father's face was a little unfriendly, Tommy was so scared that he didn't dare to speak. Wharton's face softened a little. He paused and said, If there's nothing else, that's all. I still have to see Lord Pope. After saying that, he ignored Tommy and turned to stride out. The short conversation ended just like that, leaving Tommy at a loss. Holy Roman Empire, Mount Hygel. In the middle of summer, the peak of Mount Hygel, which was covered in snow all year round, and the foot of the mountain were 2 different worlds. The peak was not a place where ordinary people could go. The Temple of God was at the highest peak of Mount Hygel. Legend had it that the Temple of God could communicate with God, and the Pope was God's spokesperson in the human world. The Pope was already more than 150 years old. At this age, he was relatively old among the human powerhouses in the sacred domain. The powerhouses in the sacred domain could prolong their lives, but it didn't mean that they were immortal. At this time, the Pope had a head full of white hair, and the wrinkles on his face were as deep as a knife. Perhaps he could use a special method to restore his youthful appearance, but it was only his appearance. There was no need for him at all. He was wearing a long red robe with noble snow fox fur on both sides of the collar, and a crimson and golden crown on his head. Ernst, the Pope of the Holy See, the only legendary being able to communicate with the divine realm. Ernst didn't seem to be in a good mood. There was a thick book of documents on his desk. Walala, a gust of wind blew over, and the document was blown open, revealing the densely packed words inside. Ron, gender, male age, 17 profession, necromancer. Turning around slightly, Ernst looked at the delicate handwriting on the document, and the wrinkles on his face deepened. Dong dong dong. At this time, the sound of empty footsteps came from outside the Divine Prophecy Hall. Ernst raised his head and looked outside, and the corners of his mouth curled into a slight smile. Lord Pope, the person who came was Wharton. He walked in front of the Pope and bowed deeply. He was wearing light armor today, and his golden hair was combed neatly. His eyebrows were lowered, showing his respect for the Pope. Wharton, you're here. A smile appeared on the Pope's old face and Ernst's wrinkled face. Yes, Lord Pope. May I ask why you summoned me so urgently? Wharton straightened up slightly and said, Take a look at the document on the table. Pope Ernst did not directly state his purpose and let him look at it himself. Wharton's gaze gradually moved down to the table. The document on the table had been blown open by the wind. His gaze focused slightly, and Wharton took a deep breath. I already know. Oh, Ernst was a little surprised. Tell me what you think. I don't have any thoughts. This heretic, just kill him directly, Wharton said without blinking. Hee. Ernst smiled, and his expression suddenly became serious. Then why didn't you do it before? Ernst's words made Wharton choke. He had sent his strongest subordinate, Diallo, to assassinate Ron. Unfortunately, Diallo had sent back false information, and he was very careless and did not send anyone to verify it. But in the end, he was responsible for this matter, and he could not shirk his responsibility. Pope Ernst's words made Wharton speechless, and he could only remain silent. I have no intention of targeting anyone, nor do I intend to pursue your mistakes. At this moment, Ernst calmed down and said faintly, Wharton, I'm just reminding you that this necromancer called Ron's strength is rapidly improving. The current him is already at the master rank, and according to the descriptions in the ancient literature, he is now an archmage necromancer. Below him is a grand magus necromancer, a sacred magus necromancer. When that time comes, what do we do? Ernst's expression gradually became serious. Wharton, I have to let you know that necromancers are an extremely terrifying profession. They may be weak at the beginning, but as their strength increases, their battle strength will become stronger and stronger. In the later stages, I'm afraid we won't be his match. Ernst's gaze slowly shifted. When that time comes, you and I will be sinners of the Holy See. Wharton was sweating profusely as he heard this, and said anxiously, Lord Pope, this... Wharton composed himself. Why? Why does the Holy See value Ron so much? He's just a necromancer. This is our mission. Ernst raised his voice. Eliminating a heresy like necromancy is indeed the glorious mission of the Holy See, but why does the Holy See have this mission? Or rather, where does this mission come from? Wharton asked. I know a little about this. Ernst calmed down and said. He sighed slightly. Speaking of which, the Holy See's entanglement with necromancy can be traced back to 100,000 years ago. 100,000 years ago? The Amros continent? Wharton was surprised. That's right. Ernst nodded. 100,000 years ago, countless necromancers, death knights, necromancers, shadow assassins, and other professions were already coveting the Amros continent. Their influence was huge and almost covered the entire continent. Even the elves, orcs, and magical beasts at their peak had no choice but to bow down to them. This influence was called the Scourge Church. I know about this. Wharton nodded. I've seen some things related to this. But hasn't the Scourge Church disappeared? Huh. Ernst's face was full of smiles. Then do you know how the Scourge Church disappeared? It said that the Holy See destroyed these heretics. According to historical records, the Holy See launched a holy war and destroyed the Scourge Church in one fell swoop. Wharton said, Wrong. Pope Ernst shook his head. 100,000 years ago, the Holy See had just been established. Our strength was not enough to be mentioned in the same breath as the Scourge Church. At that time, the Scourge Church was so powerful that it was suffocating. Then what? Wharton was surprised when he heard this. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be that everything he knew was wrong? The Holy War was indeed initiated by the Holy Church. However, it wasn't just our strength that was enough to destroy the Calamity Church. Our strength simply wasn't enough to do so. We joined forces with the orcs, elves, and magical beasts to carry out the Holy War. It could be said that at that time, almost all the strength of the entire continent was gathered together. Only then did the Calamity Church, which was at its peak, disappear. This process lasted for 100 years. Therefore, the Holy War was also called the 100-Year Holy War. Pope Ernst's eyes were full of sorrow. The humans, orcs, elves, and magical beasts formed a powerful allied army and marched towards the heart of the Scourge Church, the Undercity. Along the way, countless countries were destroyed. These countries were all under the control of the Scourge Church. At the same time, the Allied army also suffered great losses. Countless elites fell. Many of them had the idea of perishing together with the Scourge Church's powerhouses, using all their strength to deplete the strength of the Scourge Church. In the end, the elite forces of the Scourge Church were exhausted, and the Allied army won the final victory. Hearing this, Wharton's breathing quickened. He had never heard of the things Ernst was talking about before. Wharton calmed himself down and said in a hoarse voice, "In that case, the Holy See has set this mission to destroy the necromancers at all costs and prevent them from rising again." Ernst shook his head. "Wharton, you're wrong again. The rise and fall of every force is a specific process. No one can remain strong forever, and we have no intention of stopping them from rising again." Wharton was shocked. Then what? Ernst sighed. At that time, the first pope of the Holy See, Antonio, made an unexpected decision when he destroyed the scourged church. At this point, Ernst paused. His Majesty Antonio decided to launch a hunt for the necromancers in the entire Amros continent. Once this order was issued, countless necromancers were killed, and the most powerful necromancers were slaughtered. So what? Heretics must be put to death, Wharton said solemnly. Ernst smiled and said, "Then do you know how many necromancers there were in the Amros continent at that time? Let me tell you, once the order was issued, the human population of the entire Amros continent was directly reduced by 3/5. What? Wharton was completely stunned. 3/5 of the human population was a huge number. Wharton could not imagine what it would be like if 3/5 of the population of the Noah continent was reduced. More importantly, His Majesty Antonio also ordered the destruction of all books related to the Scourge Church and necromancy, not to mention cultivation notes. Even a novel that slightly mentioned the Scourge Church or necromancy was mercilessly destroyed. This process lasted for 100 years before everything related to the Scourge Church, including all the inherited memories, was completely wiped out. Wharton, do you understand now? At this time, Ernst suddenly turned around and stared at Wharton with a gaze as sharp as a sword. What we have with the Scourge Church is not a process of decline and decline, but an irreconcilable hatred. This hatred has lasted for 100,000 years. Please go to the web to see the first commercial-free article. Chapter 280. Wharton tried his best to calm himself down. After a while, he asked, "So what do you think? Lord Pope, where did you learn about these things?" Ernst did not answer. He slowly extended his finger and pointed to the sky. Wharton was shocked. "Up there?" Ernst nodded slowly. Wharton took a deep breath. "Does God really exist in this world?" "Huh." Ernst chuckled and looked at him meaningfully. "What do you think?" Wharton shook his head. "I still don't quite believe it. Even if Ron really becomes a powerhouse, it doesn't mean that he will know about the past." "You're wrong." Ernst also shook his head. "The mystery and power of necromancy is unimaginable. Ron will definitely start to investigate the truth behind the disappearance of necromancy. By then, he will know everything he needs to know." Ernst continued, "I have no intention of commenting on what the first pope did. However, what has already happened cannot be undone. All we can do is to prevent it from happening." When he said this, Pope and Ernst's faces were filled with tragic desolation. After a moment of silence, Wharton said, "Lord Pope, I will bring Ron's head back to you. Don't capture him alive. We only want to see the body." Pope said, "Wharton, do you need me to send another powerhouse from the sacred domain to assist you?" "No need." Wharton straightened up and said firmly, "Since Ron has left the Roland Empire, without Platz's protection, it will be a piece of cake for me to deal with him." Outside Twilight City, the sound of killing shook the sky. Countless skeletons surged toward the city wall like a tide. There are too many skeletons." On the city wall, a soldier said in horror. Looking at the black mass of skeletons below, his scalp tingled. "Damn it, these guys who are not afraid of death are really difficult to deal with." Another soldier said, his body trembling uncontrollably. The sword in his hand had already killed several skeletons. Those skeletons turned into black smoke and disappeared. It felt like he had fought with air, but the injuries on his body were real. "What do we do?" All the defenders of Twilight City were shrouded in a layer of haze. Ron stood in the middle of the high platform built by the Ebian rebels. Below him were dozens of Ebian rebels pushing carts. From the high platform, he could see the entire battlefield. At this time, he was surrounded by soul power. His eyes had turned green. He held the orange staff high, and his soul power poured out. A large number of skeletons climbed up from the ground and rushed toward the city like an endless sea of skeletons. Like ants, the skeleton warriors swarmed toward the top of the city wall. Some of them had already reached the top of the wall. Behind them stood the fully armed Ethiopian resistance army, watching everything that was happening in front of them. Once the city was breached, they would launch a tide-like attack. They would use a large number of fearless skeletons to exhaust the enemy's resistance. The moment the enemy couldn't hold on any longer would be the moment the city was breached. This was what the Ebian rebels did in the previous sieges. This Ron is really amazing. I didn't expect him to have such an ability. Juliana, the commander of the Ebian rebels, stood on the other side. She quietly looked at Ron on the high platform and murmured, "It seems that it might be a good thing for my Ebia children to learn necromancy from him." Juliana thought about the scene when she had countless necromancers under her command, and they summoned a large number of skeletons at the same time. Thinking of this, Juliana's heart became restless. Her confidence in the restoration of her country also increased a lot. Are there any archers or mages? Hurry up and kill that necromancer. Some soldiers on the city wall shouted. At this moment, they understood that the only way to stop these crazy skeletons was to kill the person controlling them. The archers listened to the order and hurriedly nocked arrows. The mages also trembled as they raised the magic staffs in their hands. For a time, countless long-range attacks bombarded Ron. It's too late to think of long-range attacks now. With a cold smile, Ron raised the legendary staff in his hand. A bone wall soared into the air and tightly surrounded him. Boom, boom, boom. Countless power mixed with magic and chi bombarded the bone wall. The bone wall trembled a little, and a large number of cracks spread out. However, a strange thing happened. After the bombardment, the bone wall gradually returned to its original state under the astonished eyes of the crowd. What the hell? Bastard! The Holy Empire soldiers on top of the city walls cursed one after another. Their hearts were filled with bewilderment. Just where in the world did the Ethiopian rebels find such a powerful necromancer? Pornographic novels at this time. The skeleton mages summoned by Ron showed their might. Countless magic rained down on the city wall of Twilight City. The soldiers of the Holy Roman Empire on the city wall were blown up. Nearly 1,000 skeleton mages attacked at the same time. Even if it was the lowest level magic bomb, they would not be able to withstand it. It was as if flowers had bloomed on the city wall. Under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, Ron performed a perfect magic feast. Finally, the defenders of Twilight City could not hold on anymore. In the face of the continuous magic attack, they will also began to waver. Some timid soldiers shouted loudly and quickly retreated, only to be killed by the military officers who were supervising the battle. Chaos, even more chaos. Juliana's face finally showed joy. She, who had been on the battlefield for a long time, could already see the dawn of victory. Boom! With a loud sound, the unguarded city gate finally fell down with a bang. The city is breached, the city is breached. Enthusiastic cheers came from the Ebian rebels. In an instant, everyone's fighting spirit was ignited. Juliana, Elpha, and the others could not help but glance at Ron from the corner of their eyes, sighing in their hearts. This victory seemed to come too easily. Juliana's pair of beautiful eyes stared intently at Ron, full of appreciation. But Catherine next to her looked as if she had lost her soul, as if it had nothing to do with her, in sharp contrast to her sister. Forcefully suppressing the raging flames of jealousy in his heart, Lachlan waved his long sword. Charge! With that, he clamped his legs together and took the lead to charge out. Although his heart was extremely uncomfortable, Lachlan also knew that this was not the time to be emotional. At this moment, the Ethiopian resistance army finally made their move. Like a ferocious tiger descending from the mountains, they charged into Twilight City through the collapsed city gates and slaughtered the Holy Empire defenders who couldn't retreat in time. Corpses littered the plains. After fighting fiercely for half an hour. Finally, the Abia royal family's centaur flag finally fluttered high above the city wall of Twilight City. The battle lasted for more than 3 hours before it finally ended. The Ebian rebels unexpectedly suffered 0 casualties. Ron walked down from the high platform with a tired face, and the densely packed skeleton warriors also retreated, turning into a cloud of black smoke and disappearing into the air. Slightly raising his head, Ron saw a familiar figure. Juliana stood in front of him, full of concern, and said sincerely, "Ron, thank you. You did a good job." "Hypocrite," Ron coldly snorted, instantly coming to a conclusion in his heart. He already knew that this woman was extremely scheming. The so-called help this time was just her taking advantage of him. For a time, the status of the once high and mighty female magician in his heart dropped by several levels. The feeling of looking up to her when he was a child no longer existed. "Woman, you're still just a woman." Gently waving his hand, Ron's voice was somewhat hoarse. "No need to thank me. Juliana, I hope you don't forget my promise." For some reason, when Juliana saw Ron's slightly contemptuous gaze, her heart involuntarily thumped. This gaze made her very uncomfortable. "What's going on?" Juliana's eyes were somewhat evasive, and there was a moment of panic. Fiercely clenching her teeth, Juliana suppressed the throbbing in her heart and forced a smile on her face. "No, don't worry, Ron. I will do what I say." Ron no longer had the interest to say anything to this woman, so he turned around and left. Seeing Ron's back turn and leave, Juliana couldn't help but secretly scold herself for being shameless. For her own plan, she dragged unrelated people into the war. She really wanted to call out to Ron, but when the words came to her mouth, she couldn't say it out. Her body moved slightly, and in a trance, Juliana felt her body being hugged by someone. She turned around and saw that it was Elpha. "What's wrong?" Elpha gently hugged the beauty in his arms and gently sniffed her fragrant hair. "Nothing." Juliana wasn't in the mood. She gently opened Elpha's embrace, turned around, and said with a smile, "Let's enter the city." Seeing Juliana take the initiative to leave his arms, Elpha's eyes flashed with a trace of displeasure. When they were in the Roland Empire, the two of them were like a couple in love, but now they were strangers like strangers. "Okay." Elpha gently nodded. He guessed that Juliana might want to maintain her image in front of everyone. The two of them quickly left. Stepping on the smoke-filled battlefield, they slowly walked into Twilight City. Not far away, Lachlan, who was burning with jealousy, stood there quietly watching all of this. His fists were clenched so tight that the veins on them were protruding. Ron also followed the Ebian rebels into Twilight City. Along the way, the Ebian rebels warmly greeted him. "Sir Ron, thank you for your hard work, Sir Ron. Sir Ron, do you need any help?" After getting along with each other these days, the soldiers had seen Ron's strength and performance. They had already put away their contempt for this powerful necromancer and spoke to Ron with deep respect in their eyes. Respecting the strong was a habit of the people of Noah Continent. For these Ebia soldiers, Ron's existence wasn't as simple as respect for the strong. They knew that without Ron, even if they could break into Twilight City, they would have suffered a lot of casualties. It was the skeleton corps summoned by Ron that saved many of their lives. "Thank you, everyone, but there's no need." Chapter 281. Ron slowly walked into the city. Twilight City was filled with the smell of blood. Not far away, he could hear sporadic sounds of fighting. Groups of trainee shepherds were unable to retreat in time. The Ebian rebels caught him and forced him to line up with swords and walk towards the place where he was imprisoned. Looking at the rows of serious-looking Ebian rebels, Ron couldn't help but sigh at the power of Juliana. In just a day and a half, she had gathered more than 100,000 Ebian rebels, and most of them were cavalry. Only now did he know that the army he saw in Manchester was only the tip of the iceberg. The Ebian rebels were only her strength on the surface. The dark organization was the real power. It seemed that under the high-pressure rule of the Holy Roman Empire, there were still many people who missed the Ebia royal family. "Ron, At this time, a voice woke Ron from his contemplation. He saw a beautiful woman wearing a black skeleton robe and a hood standing in front of him. It was Vivian. Behind her stood a large group of people. They were the students Ron had recruited in Manchester. There were a total of 124 people, almost all of them under the age of 18. The leader was Paige, who was looking at him with a very fanatical expression. "Mr. Ron, your undead magic is really amazing. When can you teach us?" The children gathered around and asked. "Yes, Mr. Ron, we can't wait. I really want to learn undead magic as soon as possible." A girl said timidly, her eyes still showing a desire. Ron glanced at her. He already knew the girl's name. She was called Elu. Children worshipped idols. Ron had shown his invincible might on the battlefield. He had single-handedly commanded the undead army to break through Twilight City. This blood-boiling scene had left a shadow in the hearts of the children. They were very excited and asked to start learning undead magic immediately. Looking at the children's fervent gazes, Merlin smiled. His smile was filled with gratification. It was as though he could see the shadows of the children who had diligently studied necromancy back in the days of the Calamity Church. Back then, the children also had fervent gazes towards the most powerful force in the world. "Okay, I'll start the class right away." Ron smiled and nodded. He said so, but the exhaustion on his face couldn't be concealed. After a day of fighting, his physical strength had been greatly consumed. "Catherine has already arranged everything for us. We can start the class after dinner, but," Vivian said with some worry, "Ron, you look tired. Do you want to rest?" "No need, I'm fine," Ron said with a smile. Sighing slightly, Vivian looked at Ron with eyes full of concern. She suddenly became worried. Looking around, Vivian lowered her voice. "Ron, you're using undead magic so openly. The Holy See will definitely know of your existence. Aren't you afraid?" Vivian didn't continue, but she knew that Ron already understood. Hearing Vivian say this, Ron was also worried. But since he had promised to help, he could only brace himself and continue. He hoped that Abia was far away from the Holy See, and the news wouldn't spread so quickly. "Don't worry, there's still 2 days. In 2 days, I'll fulfill my promise to Catherine. At that time, we'll rush back to the Roland Empire as fast as we can. As long as we return to the Balarax Academy, even the Holy See won't be able to do anything to us." Ron pondered for a moment and said. "But," Vivian still wanted to say something, but Ron waved his hand. "Forget it, it's settled." In the center of Twilight City was the City Lord's mansion, which occupied an extremely large area. Although it had been destroyed by the Ebian rebels, it still exuded an oppressive aura of wealth. Outside the door were 2 lifelike stone statues of dragons flapping their wings. The hall in the center of the City Lord's mansion was used for banquets. It was a temporary classroom that Ron used to teach undead magic. It was specially arranged by the second miss, Catherine. Although Ron didn't intend to accept it, he could only accept it under her insistence. 2 fully armed Ebian rebels were guarding the entrance of the City Lord's mansion. When they saw Ron walk in, they hurriedly saluted him respectfully and led him into the magnificent temporary classroom. After a tiring day, Ron washed away the stinky sweat all over his body. He felt a bit more spirited. He lifted his leg and walked into the classroom. At this time, more than 100 gazes were directed at him. Their gazes contained a trace of passion, a thirst for knowledge, as well as boundless worship for him. Resisting the excitement in his heart, Ron took a deep breath and slowly walked up to the makeshift podium. He gently put down the book in his hand. His gaze slowly swept across the room. He saw that all the students had their hands on the table and were sitting up straight. Paige's tall figure was sitting in the front row. He was the most enthusiastic one here. Because he was older, Ron let him be the class monitor. 124 students. Ron had recruited a total of 124 students in Manchester. Originally, there hadn't been that many students who wanted to sign up, but because there were enough students and Ron didn't want them because they were too old, Catherine had been a great help in this matter. Under her persuasion, many families with children had sent their own children over. Most of the children were between 9 and 18 years old. Ron didn't refuse any of them. In his opinion, the more people there were, the better. Only then would the undead major be seen as strong. Ron cleared his throat and said in a clear voice, "Students, it's a pleasure to meet all of you. Perhaps some of you haven't met me yet, so let me introduce myself. I'm Ron, and I've studied necromancy magic for over a year. I'm also your mentor on the path of necromancy magic. Necromancy magic is a great power. It's a treasure left behind by the ancient gods. Perhaps some of you saw the necromancy magic I used on the battlefield today and were surprised by its power and mystery. I can only say that the necromancy magic I've displayed now is only the tip of the iceberg. Like many of you, I still have a long way to go in the pursuit of the ultimate mysteries of death." Ron's tone gradually relaxed from its initial nervousness. His entire body was brimming with the radiance of confidence. Under his slightly tired and magnetic voice, the children listened very seriously. After a few words, the children were deeply impressed by the mysterious power of necromancy magic. There's only one type of necromancy magic, and that's the necromancy magic that was passed down in the ancient continent 100,000 years ago. The necromancy magic that's popular on the Noah continent is only a wrong interpretation of the ancient necromancy magic. In order to let everyone better understand the difference between correct necromancy magic and wrong necromancy magic, we now invite our class monitor, Paige, to give us a demonstration. Paige immediately stood up and said to all the students, "I didn't know before that the necromancy magic I've been practicing was wrong. I hope everyone can open their eyes and clearly see the difference between the two types of necromancy magic. Don't make the same mistake as me." His hands didn't stop moving as he spoke, and he casually summoned a skeleton. At the same time, Ron also summoned the most ordinary skeleton warrior. When the two skeletons stood together, the sharp-eyed students immediately distinguished them. They saw that the skeleton that Paige had summoned was dull. Although it could move, it was clearly dead. On the other hand, the skeleton warrior that Ron had summoned exuded a fierce aura. The class was in an uproar all of a sudden. Many students were whispering to each other, chattering nonstop. "Look, the skeleton that the teacher summoned is so fierce. It looks like it can go berserk and kill people at any time." That's right, the thing that Paige summoned is like a skeleton. It doesn't have any aura of life. "Teacher Ron, what's with the black gas on that skeleton? Paige doesn't seem to have it." Ron and Vivian looked at each other and smiled. Only this kind of comparison could arouse the students' strong interest and allow them to have a deeper understanding of necromancy magic. "Quiet down. Everyone quiet down." Seeing that they were almost done discussing, Ron waved his hand to quiet them down. The children were very obedient and immediately quieted down. Paige also sat back in his seat. Ron smiled. "Now I'll start asking questions. Ilu, what do you think is the difference between the two skeletons?" Ilu, who was wearing shabby clothes, charmingly stood up. Her small face was flushed red. Since childhood, this was the first time she was questioned by a teacher. Ilu was a little nervous. Seeing Ron's encouraging eyes, her nervous heart immediately calmed down. She carefully observed the two skeletons and then timidly said, It seems the skeleton that teacher summoned has cyan eyes." The children burst into laughter. The skeleton's eyes were indeed cyan, but the biggest difference between the two skeletons wasn't this. The skeleton that Ron summoned had a strong and fierce aura, which explained everything very well. Ron waved his hand, smiled, and let her sit down, and said, "I put the two skeletons out so that everyone can better distinguish the difference between the two." Ilu's observation was very careful. She was right. The skeleton that I summoned had cyan eyes, but the skeleton that Paige summoned didn't have cyan eyes. Then why did the skeleton that I summoned have cyan eyes? Ron raised a question. His eyes looked around. Of course, there wasn't a single student who could answer it. Even Paige had a blank face. Ron smiled. "This is also the first lesson of necromancy that I'm going to talk about. It's also the most important lesson. It's something that all necromancers must master, because this thing runs through the entire use of necromancy. It's the same as the do-chi of a swordsman and the elements that a magician controls. And this thing's name is soul force." Next, Ron began to talk about the mysteries and cultivation methods of soul force. He talked nonstop on the podium, and the students below listened very seriously. Only Ron's voice echoed in the whole hall. The students' faces showed a thirsty expression. In a trance, they seemed to feel that under the guidance of Teacher Ron, they were walking on a broad road that they had never heard of before. The mysterious, terrifying, and powerful necromancy opened a door to the path of the strong for them. To see the first commercial-free article, please visit Chapter 282. Under the dim light, the generals of the Holy Roman Empire gathered together and quietly looked at the map on the table. The generals here included the Knights of Order of the Holy Crusade, the 19th Legion of the Holy Roman Empire, and the guards of the Abia province. Everyone frowned and was worried about the current situation. The Rainbow Stone Castle was once the kingdom of Ebia's fortress to defend against the Roland Empire. Almost all the troops of the Holy Roman Empire in the Abia province were gathered here. Under the aggressive attack of the Ebian rebels, the defenders of the Holy Roman Empire were forced to retreat from Manchester to Twilight City, then from Twilight City to Dawn City, and now to the Rainbow Stone Castle. All of this was because of one person. That person was not Juliana, but Ron. They were worried about Ron's skeleton core. "What should we do now?" a fat Legion commander said. This fat pig-like figure was the Legion commander of the Order Knights of the Holy Crusade. Although he was fat, he was a Radiant Knight, a division-level expert. Due to the hot weather, his fat pig-like face was covered in sweat. Everyone was silent. They did not have many solutions to the current situation. Tomorrow, at the earliest, the Ebian rebels would attack the Rainbow Stone Castle. They were not sure if they could stop the crazy attack of Ron's skeleton core. Slew did not say a word. He picked up a pen and pondered for a moment. Then, he drew a red line from Manchester to the Rainbow Stone Castle. "What is this?" A general looked at him and asked curiously. Slew threw down the pen and sighed softly. "The battle at the Rainbow Stone Castle is the end. Their goal is very obvious. They want to open up the passage between Manchester and the Roland Empire. Open up the passage to the Roland Empire." All the generals did not react for a moment. Warden paused for a moment. "I'm afraid that in the next moment, the military aid from the Roland Empire will slowly arrive in the hands of the Ebian rebels." "What?" The generals of the three legions were all shocked, and they looked at the map again. Sure enough, after occupying the Colored Stone Castle, Abia's territory was connected together, and with the Roland Empire behind them, they basically had the power to challenge the Holy Roman Empire. After Slew's explanation, everyone understood. If that was the case, they would be in big trouble. All the generals frowned and felt that it was very troublesome. Looking at the young Slew, these middle-aged generals felt heartfelt admiration. As expected of a talent from the Imperial Military Academy, he could see the problem so clearly. At this time, a general said in a deep voice, "Hasn't the Roland Empire never interfered with the matters between us and the Kingdom of Ebia? Why did they suddenly change their mind?" Slew smiled bitterly. "But now, they have begun to interfere. As far as I know, recently, the Roland Empire has millions of troops at the border, and they have been practicing day and night, as if they are ready to move to the west at any time. Although we know that it is fake, we don't dare to lower our guard. Many elite legions have received the order to move to the east. If it wasn't for the fact that I am nervous about the war here, I'm afraid that my 19th Legion would have already moved north." All the generals could see at a glance that the Roland Empire and the Ebian rebels were cooperating strategically. It seemed that they had reached some kind of agreement. Slew also felt that it was very strange. From a map, the location of the Kingdom of Ebia was very important. If he was His Majesty Nikolai of the Roland Empire, he would rather die than sit and watch the Holy Roman Empire annex Abia. However, the Roland Empire did not interfere when the Holy Roman Empire annexed the Kingdom of Ebia. Ever since the sacred domain powerhouses of Abia died, the Roland Empire refused to help the Kingdom of Ebia many times. None of the sacred domain powerhouses of the Roland Empire stood up for Abia. They just sat and watched as the Kingdom of Ebia was turned into the Holy Roman Empire's province of Abia. Silo couldn't figure it out, no matter how hard he tried. Now that the situation had suddenly changed, he was even more confused. Forget it. Since he can't figure it out, let him be. Slu shook his head and stopped thinking about it. However, he had a feeling that the matter of Abia was not a problem between the Holy Roman Empire and the Roland Empire. It was likely that there was a higher level of existence influencing the situation of the continent, and this level was something that he did not have the ability to touch. The most important thing is still that necromancer called Ron. A general fiercely slammed his fist on the table and said angrily, if not for his existence, that little bitch Juliana would not have dared to use all of her hidden forces to counterattack. How many years has it been since such a large-scale battle in the Abia province? It seems that Juliana has taken out all of her assets. It seems that Juliana is very confident in this, Ron. Another general said. That's right. Since the start of the battle, with the cooperation of those skeletons, they have not suffered any casualties. A general said with a wry smile. On the other hand, we have suffered heavy losses. Everyone knows that it is not worth it to use the lives of our soldiers to fight against those senseless, undead creatures. This is also the reason why we have been defeated again and again. Slu nodded and said, I have investigated that, Ron. He was born in a place called Maple Leaf Town in the westernmost part of the Holy Roman Empire. I don't know how he learned necromancy a year ago. At first, he was not very strong, but as his cultivation deepened, his strength increased rapidly. According to my estimates, a master rank expert would not be able to deal with him. Then what should we do? The generals looked at each other. Among them, the strongest was only a master rank expert. Then a master rank expert. A general roared. He was the commander of one of the legions of the Holy Crusade. During the battle in Dawn City, he had been forced to flee and had almost lost his life. He had long held a grudge against Ron. All the generals' eyes lit up. You have a way to invite a master rank expert? Of course. The general's face revealed a cruel smile. Don't worry, I will report to the Vatican now and ask them to send a master rank expert. Tomorrow will be the day Ron dies. As long as he dies, the Ebian rebels will collapse without a fight. In the early hours of the next day, when the sky had just begun to brighten, an ear-piercing sound of a bugle horn broke the tranquility of the colored stone castle. At this time, on the high city walls, magic lamps were lit up. A commotion broke out in the small town of Colored Stone Castle. Heavens, they are here! A soldier exclaimed and looked for a weapon in a flurry. Quick, get on the city walls. Another soldier rushed out. I will report to the Lord. Below the city walls, there was a large mass of black skeletons. The soldiers felt their scalps go numb. There were more than 10,000 skeletons, and they were densely packed together. Heavens, there are so many of them. The soldiers looked at each other and were stunned by the scene in front of them. They were not afraid of the number of skeletons, but of the fact that they would have to fight these skeletons who were not afraid of death and did not have any consciousness. There were 6,000 skeleton warriors, 2,000 skeleton warriors, 1,000 skeleton magicians, and 5 black knights. This was the limit of the undead creatures that Ron could summon. In order to summon them, Ron was almost exhausted. Not far away, the Ethiopian resistance army was quietly guarding the rear. Their cavalry was at the front, and their infantry was at the back. They had no intention of attacking. They were like a poisonous snake, quietly lying in ambush, waiting for an opportunity to attack. This is the last battle. As long as we take down the Colored Stone Castle, we can return to the Roland Empire. Ron stood on a high platform and thought silently. After fighting for several days, he was very tired, but in order to fulfill his promise to Catherine, he persevered. Looking at the Colored Stone Castle that was filled with dense fog in the morning light, Ron took a deep breath and waved his raised hand down. Attack! Under the command, the skeleton corps began to move. They first moved forward slowly, and, at the same time, the skeleton magician corps began to condense magic elements. Not long after, countless magic bullets rose into the air and flew straight towards the low walls of the Colored Stone Castle. Boom, boom, boom. The magic bullets fell on the walls like blooming fireworks. The soldiers of the Holy Roman Empire who were hit by the magic bullets fell in droves. Quick, quick, disperse, a soldier said in horror. Magician Kor quickly suppressed them. Seeing the situation, Slew calmly gave the order. Due to his military talent, he was temporarily appointed as the supreme commander of the Colored Stone Castle. He gathered all the corps that were not under each other and had a final battle with Ron and the Ebian rebels. At this moment, Holy Empire's Magician Legion also began to display their might. Multicolored elemental magic shot out from the walls of Rainbow Stone Castle and rained down on the sea of skeletons. Wherever the magic went, a black mist would rise up. Any skeleton warrior that was struck by the enemy's magic would immediately turn to ash. However, the magician core of the Colored Stone Castle was not large, so their counterattack was not obvious. On the contrary, Ron commanded the skeleton magicians to use a large number of magic bullets to plow the simple and crude walls of the Colored Stone Castle. Under the cover of the skeleton magicians, the skeleton warriors quickly arrived at the bottom of the Rainbow Stone Castle's walls. A skeleton sheathed its sword on its back and used its hands and feet to climb up the wall. One by one, the skeletons climbed up the wall. These skeletons had light bodies, so climbing up the wall didn't take much effort. They're climbing up. Quick, beat these dirty skeletons down. The soldiers shouted in horror. Many of them were already waving their weapons and fighting with the skeleton warriors that had climbed up the wall. Due to the unfavorable terrain, some of the skeleton warriors fell down in the fierce battle with the Holy Roman Empire, but even more skeletons climbed up the wall. The small Colored Stone Castle had gathered the Holy Roman Empire's pornographic novels. The three major corps of the Empire, the Empire's 19th Legion, the Holy Crusades Order Corps, and the Ebia Guard Corps were all engaged in a fierce battle with Ron's skeleton warriors. Please go to the website to see the first commercial-free episode. Chapter 283. The skeleton warriors and skeleton warriors pounced forward like wolves and tigers, engaging in close combat with the soldiers of the three legions. For a moment, battle chi and black soul energy surged in all directions. Battle cries shook the sky, and countless severed limbs flew in all directions. In the midst of the fierce battle, skeletons turned into black smoke and disappeared. It was as if the priest's light was rising and falling on the city wall. The battle reached its climax as soon as it began. The situation of the battle started little by little. Like tidewater, the fearless skeleton legion continued to increase and soon occupied the top of the city wall. On the city wall, the three legions were in a mess and were forced to retreat. "Run!" someone shouted, and the soldiers of the Holy Roman Empire became restless. Fear spread, and the fighting spirit in the hearts of the soldiers was slowly eroded. Finally, they couldn't withstand the pressure and began to retreat. One spread to 10, 10 spread to 100. Facing the skeleton corps, retreat seemed to be the only choice they could make. "Run! These skeletons are too frightening. Get out of the way! Don't block the way!" The soldiers of the Holy Roman Empire ignored the command of the battlefield and began to flee. They were like birds startled by the twang of a bow, and they scrambled to get out of the way. The skeleton corps began a massacre, and corpses were strewn all over the city wall. Success! A smile finally appeared on Juliana's face. Elpha smiled and said, "Ron did well. The three legions have basically lost their ability to fight. Let's prepare to attack." Juliana smiled and slowly raised the magic staff in her hand. Traces of flames wrapped around the ruby inlaid tip. At this time, a signal flare rose into the sky and scattered like fireworks. It was exceptionally beautiful in the hazy night sky. "Attack!" Pornographic novels, he fiercely glared at Elpha, who was beside Juliana, and raised the sword in his hand. He roared and rushed out like a fierce tiger. At this time, more than 100,000 soldiers of the Ebia Resistance Army moved. They charged toward the low walls of the Rainbow Stone Fortress. For a moment, there were centaur flags fluttering in the wind everywhere. Battle cries shook the sky. Tens of thousands of war horses galloped on the ground like a surging river. Even the ground began to tremble. At this time, in the distant command post, the commanders of the three major legions of the Holy Roman Empire had ugly expressions on their faces. This was especially true for the commander-in-chief, Slew. At this moment, his mood was extremely gloomy. He looked at Ron in the distance, as if his eyes were about to spit fire. For the Battle of Rainbow Stone Stronghold, he had already made ample preparations. However, these preparations weren't of much use. Those numerous and fearless skeleton legions were truly too frightening. Due to their previous defeats, Holy Empire soldiers had long since been shrouded in a layer of shadow. What do we do now? A general took a deep breath and asked. He was very unwilling to hand over the colored stone castle just like that. Moreover, this was also a disgrace in his military career. Where are your master-level experts? Why haven't they come yet? Without any other choice, Slew could only vent his anger on the commander of the Holy Crusade Legion of Order. He coldly stared at the fat commander of the Holy Crusade Legion of Order. You asked me, but who should I ask? How do I know they haven't come yet? The fat commander got angry when he heard this. If you have the ability, then go and fight Ron yourself. What kind of ability is it to only know how to fart here? The commander of the Legion of Order didn't back down at all, making the atmosphere a bit awkward. Seeing that they had shed all pretense of cordiality, the commander of the Abia Province's Guard Legion hurriedly tried to smooth things over. Let's not quarrel here. Let's think about what to do next. Should we retreat or continue to defend? Just as the three of them were hesitating, a soldier of the Holy Crusade hurriedly ran in. Looking at everyone present, he hurriedly moved close to the fat commander's ear and whispered a few words. The fat commander listened quietly at first, but when he heard the last sentence, his eyes revealed joy. What did you say? Archbishop Fleming has arrived? That soldier lightly nodded. Quickly invite him in. After saying that, he ignored the other two and quickly walked out. Slew and the other commander exchanged a glance, their eyes carrying a trace of surprise. Slew said, "Good guy, they actually managed to invite Archbishop Fleming?" Walking out of the command post, Slew was surprised to see that in addition to Archbishop Fleming, there were two other people. These two people also held important positions in the Holy See. Snow-white hair neatly combed to the sides, wearing a snow-white priest's robe, holding a long priest staff in his hand, and wearing a ring made of precious gems on both of his fingers. He was the Archbishop of the Northeast Diocese of the Holy See, Guangming's Pastor Fleming, the honorary knight of the Temple Knights. The master-rank powerhouse Finro was a heroic middle-aged man. He had a thick beard on his upper lip, and his whole body was covered in heavy armor. He looked extremely sturdy. The other one was the guardian of the Hall of Redemption's Temple Master Imina, the fire element great swordsman McStock. He was about 30 years old, had a fair and handsome face, and his short hair was neat and tidy. The arrival of three master-rank powerhouses in this small rainbow stone castle brought a pleasant surprise to all the commanders. Lord Archbishop Fleming, Lord Finro, Lord McStock, the fat commander of the Holy Crusade, greeted them enthusiastically. Archbishop Fleming smiled and nodded, but Finro and McStock coldly snorted and turned their heads away. The two of them came from Mount Hygel and didn't think too highly of these ordinary officers of the Holy Roman Empire. Seeing the chaotic scene in the distance, Archbishop Fleming wrinkled his brows and asked, "What's going on?" The fat legion commander let out a long sigh. "Archbishop Fleming, you've seen it very clearly. That heretic Ron is very powerful. Even the army can't do anything to him. So, we're here to ask for your help. We already know. We came here on Pope's orders to kill the heretic Ron. It seems that we can still make it in time." Archbishop Fleming nodded and calmly said, "What is the strength of that heretic?" Before the fat legion commander could answer, he was coldly interrupted by someone. The one who spoke was McStock. He sneered and said, "What is the strength of that heretic? No matter how strong he isn't our opponent." Slew hurriedly said, "Lord McStock, you must not lower your guard. Ron's strength isn't simple." McStock didn't answer. He only felt disdain and coldly sneered. At this time, panicked voices came from the front. "Help! Quickly run! Those skeletons are killing their way over." Countless soldiers of the Holy Roman Empire ran over. They threw away their helmets and abandoned their armor. Their faces were filled with fear, as if they had seen something terrifying as they ran for their lives. Seeing this scene, the commanders of the 3 legions felt their faces burn. The ones who were fleeing in panic were their subordinates. At this time, a miserable cry was heard. A body that couldn't escape in time involuntarily soared into the air and fiercely fell to the ground. Pieces of blood were scattered on the ground, and the half of the body that had been chopped off kept squirming and letting out mournful cries. This cruel scene made everyone feel a chill. Everyone's gazes focused. At this time, a figure flashed out from the corner. It was wearing heavy armor and riding a huge skeletal horse. Its eyes flashed with a faint green light, and the sharp-boned spear in its hand drooped down. A cold, killing intent locked onto everyone. Everyone shuddered at the same time. The appearance of the Black Knight brought them great pressure. This valiant, undead creature seemed to have a life of its own. It slowly raised the spear in its hand as if it was declaring war on them. These filthy heretics are indeed arrogant. Only McStock was not affected. He was a great swordsman, and the Black Knight's aura could not suppress him. He snorted coldly, and his handsome face was filled with killing intent. The portal bag on his waist flashed, and a high-grade, dark gold-grade, 2-handed sword appeared in his hand. His whole body was wrapped in blazing hot flames as he fiercely rushed toward the Black Knight. "Go to hell." A sinister smile appeared on McStock's face. In an instant, he appeared above the Black Knight and swung the sword in his hand. The Black Knight did not show any signs of weakness. The skeletal horse under it raised its front hooves in the air, and the spear in its hand was aimed at McStock. Boom! The 2 powerful forces collided, and a loud explosion was heard. The burst of energy from the 2 forces burst out in a ring shape and spread in all directions. How is this possible? McStock was shocked. He was prepared to kill this undead creature in an instant. His purpose was to establish his dominance in front of everyone. He used 30% of his strength in this attack. The Black Knight only took a step back. 30% of his strength was not enough to cause much damage to it. It rested for a while, and the spear in its hand was raised, ready to attack again. So strong. Whether it was Archbishop Fleming, Honorary Knight Finro, or Slew and the others, this thought flashed through their minds. These people who had previously looked down on these undead mages became cautious. These powerful and fearless undead creatures were not easy to deal with. Courting death, McStock felt that he had lost face in front of everyone, and he flew into a rage out of humiliation. In an instant, the power of his flames reached the maximum. He raised the sword in his hand, and the blade shone with a glaring light. McStock's aura continued to rise until it reached the peak. Facing the Black Knight, who was not afraid of death, the flaming sword in his hand chopped down like a mountain. Flaming meteor slash, a blazing energy suddenly spread out, and the high temperature continued to spread in all directions. "Not good, we have to dodge," Archbishop Fleming shouted. He knew that McStock had used all his strength in his anger. The fighting strength of an expert swordsman when he went all out wasn't a joke. If they were a step slower, they might be affected. Just as everyone left, they saw a blazing wave of flames sweeping out. At this time, everyone turned around and saw that the surrounding trees and houses, as well as Slew's temporary command post, had been engulfed by the terrifying wave of flames. The all-out attack of a fire-expert swordsman was actually this terrifying. McStock stood in the raging flames and slowly raised his head, a sneer hanging on his face. The terrifying attack that had gathered all the power of an expert swordsman had already turned the Black Knight into ashes. Looking at the surroundings that had been destroyed by the flames, McStock had a satisfied expression on his face. At this time, McStock's heart was slightly moved. He felt a sharp gaze lock onto him. He suddenly raised his head and saw a youth standing on the platform. This youth was holding a white magic staff and was wearing a black robe. He didn't have a handsome appearance, but he had a pair of black eyes that weren't welcomed in Noah's continent. He also had black hair that only the commoners would have. Chapter 284. A cold, killing intent spread through the air, as though it was freezing the space around them. "Miss, who are you?" McStock asked coldly. "Sir, he is Ron." Before Ron could reply, the fat commander of the Holy Crusade Army of Order answered. He gritted his teeth in hatred at the sight of Ron. "Ron?" McStock was stunned for a moment before he laughed. "Interesting. You actually came to me to seek your death." Ron smiled faintly. "Aren't you the one who came to seek your death?" With a wave of his hand, a large number of skeletons surrounded them. Their eyes shone with a faint green light, and their bodies were wrapped in black gas. In an instant, they had completely surrounded them. There was no trace of panic on the faces of the commanders. Even if they couldn't defeat Ron, it was still possible for them to escape unscathed. As for the masters, that was even less of a problem. At this point, a battle was unavoidable. Fleming, Finro, and McStock exchanged glances. With a slight movement, the three of them rose into the air and floated in midair. Xi and Ron, they are masters. Just as Ron was guessing the strength of the opponents, Homelin's familiar voice sounded in his mind, causing his hand to tremble slightly. Master-level expert? Ron sucked in a breath of cold air. In an instant, he felt that the situation had become serious. The existence of the three masters brought him great pressure. At this moment, the three master-level powerhouses made their moves. As they raised their hands and feet, their powerful moves exploded with their strongest power. Sacred Flame, Sacred Impact, Dance of Flames. The three masters moved at the same time, and a powerful force filled the entire space. Boom! On the ground, a large amount of energy and fire waves stirred up the dust as if they were flying into the air. The sky, which had just begun to brighten, became somewhat gloomy. "No, run!" As if frightened by the terrifying power, the soldiers of the Ethiopian resistance army screamed and fled, hoping to escape from this terrifying area. In front of three master-level powerhouses, most of their strength was only at the novice level, and they were too weak to do anything. The Ethiopian resistance army was very lucky because the target of the three masters was not them. However, Ron's Skeleton Legion was in trouble. More than half of them were wiped out by the combined attack of the three masters. Even the Black Knights, who had the strongest defense, could not withstand the terrifying attack of the three masters. That is, not far away, Juliana, who was commanding the army, opened her eyes wide. She looked at the three figures floating in the air in disbelief. Master-level expert, Lachlan and Urfa both shuddered. To be able to emit such a powerful aura, who else could it be other than a master? Although Juliana was also a Fire Grand Magus, in reality, she couldn't defeat any one of the three. Fumin, Finro, and McStock were all mid-level masters. Juliana's heart sank. This matter was troublesome. Ron was stupefied. The skeleton army he was most proud of had been wiped out in an instant. If it were to happen again, the skeleton army he had painstakingly summoned would be wiped out. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. At this moment, Ron knew that he couldn't be complacent. Ron finally understood that when the difference in strength was too great, numbers alone were useless. Those low-level skeleton warriors, and skeleton magicians couldn't withstand the terrifying attack of a master. Crash, crash, crash. Countless stones fell, and a large hole appeared where the three of them had attacked. It was as if someone had dug it out. The ground crackled with sparks, and all the Skeleton Legion had disappeared from the hole. A casual attack from the three had destroyed half of the Rainbow Stone Castle. "Yeah, we used too much strength." Fumin laughed. "It's McStock. That guy can't control his strength." Finro laughed. "There's nothing I can do about it. My strength is too great." McStock shrugged. The three in the sky chatted as if there was no one else present. They didn't put the people on the ground in their eyes. In their eyes, professionals below the master rank were all ants. On the ground, Slew and the other two corps commanders exchanged glances and sighed in their hearts. The problem that had troubled them for many days had been easily solved by the three master rank powerhouses. At this moment, they finally understood that strength was the root of all problems. If they had enough strength, then all the problems in front of them wouldn't be a problem. Slew quietly looked at the sky with envy in his eyes. He secretly swore in his heart that one day he would also become a master rank powerhouse. Ron, the only thing we could do now is to let Spec fight. You simply aren't their match. At this moment, Homeland's voice sounded in Ron's ears. Indeed, the difference in strength between Ron, who was only an Archmage necromancer, and the three of them was too great. At this moment, he had no other choice but to take out his strongest trump card. Ron slowly nodded and took a deep breath. His left hand reached for the space bag at his waist. McStock sneered. You guys is that guy called Ron scared silly by our strength? It's very likely, Finrose said with a fake smile. Otherwise, what he would do now would be to immediately run away. Hee. Archbishop Fumin laughed. If he wants to run away, he'll have to ask for our permission first. Ron coldly snorted. The space bag in his hand flashed, and a figure appeared on the high platform. Archbishop Fumin frowned. You guys, what is that guy doing? It looks like he took out something. It's not a weapon, Finrose said. It's a person. McStock took a deep breath and corrected. No, it's impossible to put a living person into a space bag. It's a corpse. A corpse? Why'd he take out a corpse? Archbishop Fumin was puzzled. At this moment, the corpse moved. It stretched out its hand and grabbed the dark gold longsword, Earth's Fission, and shakily stood up. What? It wasn't just Archbishop Fumin and the others. Even the spectating Slew was shocked, his eyes wide open. A corpse could actually stand up. This was simply too inconceivable. Is this the corpse of Ron's Sacred Domain powerhouse? Juliana asked Catherine beside her. Her eyes were shining as she stared at the corpse's every move, thinking that if she could get her hands on this corpse, the possibility of reviving her country would greatly increase. Yes, Catherine nodded. Seeing her sister's expression, how could she not know what she was thinking? She lightly sighed and said, Sister, only Ron can control this corpse. It's useless for us to get this corpse. Oh, hearing her sister's words, Juliana lightly nodded, but a trace of disappointment flashed in her eyes. Undead magic from 100,000 years ago had reappeared on the continent. To Fumin and the others, it was inconceivable. His appearance stunned the three of them. Resurrecting a corpse, as expected of heresy. Fumin's face revealed a trace of disgust. As the great Guangming priest of the Holy See, he was very resistant to all evil things. Finro's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. I wanted to spare your life and bring you back to the Holy See to make you recognize your crimes. But there's no need for that now. Cultivating such an evil spell is already a capital offense. Kill him. McStock didn't say much, but the murderous intent on his face revealed everything in his heart. For a moment, the three figures turned into streaks of light, carrying a strong killing intent as they fiercely pounced on Spec. Under the influence of the Holy See's teachings, they were filled with hatred for evil heresy. Slightly raising his head, Spec's ash-gray eyes turned. Facing three master-rank powerhouses, Spec showed no fear. His expressionless figure paused for a moment, then disappeared from the spot in an instant. Swoosh! A gray figure appeared from a pornographic novel. Above McStock, a long sword was raised high and fiercely chopped down. Fast speed. The three were shocked. This speed was extremely frightening, even among master-rank powerhouses. McStock didn't expect the opponent to come so quickly. It was already too late for him to counterattack, so he could only raise his long sword to meet the attack head-on. Boom! The two clashed in the air. Earth and fire elemental powers exploded, creating a huge explosion in the air. Red and yellow lights instantly lit up the sky. Immediately after, the two figures suddenly separated. McStock, are you all right? Finro was startled and hurriedly asked. An earth elemental great swordsman. McStock said as he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He was clearly at a disadvantage in the battle just now. A corpse that appeared out of nowhere actually had the strength of a great swordsman. All of this was too strange. Archbishop Fleming had no choice but to be cautious. He used a healing spell to treat McStock's injuries. There's something fishy about this matter. Everyone attacked together. Don't give him a chance. Fleming, Finrow, and McStock responded in unison. 2 white and 1 red radiance appeared on their bodies as they faced off against Speck's yellow fighting aura. In the next moment, the 4 of them fiercely clashed. Boom, boom, boom. All kinds of lights flickered in the sky. The sound of an intense battle shook everyone's eardrums, and even the earth began to shake. The 3 from the Holy See worked together and quickly suppressed the great swordsman Speck. Speck was able to resist for a while in the beginning, but soon after, he was at a disadvantage. The situation was extremely unfavorable for Ron's side. The fierce battle in the sky above Rainbow Stone Castle affected everyone's nerves. At one point, they were worried, but at the other, they were happy. For the Ebian rebels, Ron's defeat meant their defeat. No one could stop the attack of the Holy Roman Empire. The 3 great swordsmen were almost invincible in their eyes. As for the people led by Slew, their defeat was already a foregone conclusion. It was just a matter of whether the experts sent by the Holy See could kill Ron. If they could kill the skeleton summoner Ron, they would still have a chance to turn defeat into victory. They would also be able to explain themselves to the Empire. Ron's heart was in his throat. He was very clear about Speck's strength. He was only a great swordsman. This time, he was facing the joint attack of 3 great swordsmen. Ron wasn't sure if he could defeat them. Juliana, who was watching from below, couldn't help but worry. She was hesitating whether or not to go up and help. She was a Fire Grand Magus and could still pin down one of them. Welcome to the Empire. Chapter 285. Powerful forces intertwined in the air as the battle reached its climax. Speck, who was at a disadvantage, had more wounds on his body, especially the one that ran from his chest to his abdomen. It was more than 80 centimeters deep, and some of his intestines had spilled out. Needless to say, it was the work of McStock. Boom! The more the fight went on, the more apprehensive Archbishop Fleming became. Speck had been fighting with his life on the line, ignoring his own defense. That was how he had managed to hold on until now. If the other side sent another Master Rank powerhouse, they would definitely not be able to bear the consequences. At this time, Speck's figure moved, and the sword in his hand was placed horizontally in front of his chest. He slightly raised his head, and a cold glint appeared in his eyes. The hearts of the 3 people trembled. That emotionless killing intent had already firmly locked onto them, and they could feel that the other side's strength was continuously rising. At this time, a powerful black arc of light spread out without any warning. What? Archbishop Fleming was gobsmacked. The black arc of light was continuously expanding in front of his eyes, and the expression on his face gradually changed to one of alarm. Domain? Finrod was dumbstruck, and his mind went blank for a moment. He isn't a master swordsman, he is. Sword, saint. Mike Speck loudly shouted, his voice filled with fear. The black halo continued to spread, becoming bigger and bigger. It was as if a black sun had appeared in the sky, engulfing the surroundings. Earth domain, gravity imprisonment. The black halo seemed to have a strange suction force, and the soil of the buildings on the ground was sucked into the sky. Half of the broken trees were spiraling in the air. No run. Everyone on the ground saw that the situation was far from good, and they scattered in all directions. The power of the domain coming from the sky was too terrifying, and if they ran a little slower, they might be sucked in. Sister run, Catherine loudly shouted. Her figure moved, and she directly disappeared in the sky. Facing a powerful domain, Juliana didn't dare to be negligent. She rode her warhorse and quickly left the scene. At this time, her eyes were shining with excitement. Domain, it really is a domain. Juliana was pleasantly surprised, and she inwardly calculated. At this time, she faintly sighed. If only Ron could be used by me. The huge black sphere of light hung in the sky, and the entire colored stone castle looked like Doomsday. Fleming, Finrod, and McStock, who were the closest to it, were quickly sucked in. My body, I can't move. McStock's face. McStock turned pale with fright. He felt his strength bound, his whole body limp, unable to exert any strength, and his body involuntarily leaned toward the center of the room. In the center, Speck stretched out one hand and raised his sword with the other. Terrifying territory power emanated from his body and filled the entire space. Not only did the gravity confinement seal their bodies, but it also sealed their strength. Under the powerful domain power, they were unable to use their full strength. Slowly raising his head, his lifeless white eyes stared at Fleming, who was the closest to him. Spake raised his left hand, and the defenseless Archbishop Fleming's body couldn't help but move closer to him. No, don't. Archbishop Fleming finally understood what the other party was trying to do. He struggled in fear, but in Speck's domain, his struggles were futile. He was only an ordinary master, and he didn't have the power to resist the domain. Ever since Speck had comprehended his domain, there was only one master-level expert who could escape from his domain, and that was Omega of the Behemoth clan. Aside from her pornographic novels, other than that, no other master would be able to escape after being swallowed by the domain. Even Omega found it extremely difficult to escape. The power of the domain was too terrifying. The tip of the sword streaked across, and as expected, Archbishop Fleming's head was separated from his body. He didn't fly up as expected. Due to the gravity of the domain, Archbishop Fleming's head was still floating in the air, slowly separating from his body. Archbishop Fleming's face was distorted with fear, and his face was filled with astonishment, as if he had seen the most terrifying thing in the world. Archbishop Fleming was dead. Everyone who saw this scene couldn't hide the shock on their faces. After all, Archbishop Fleming was one of the few powerhouses of the Holy See. This Ron is really powerful. Elpha nodded inwardly as he looked at Ron on the high platform. Although he knew that Ron also came from the Roland Empire, he didn't have any friendship with him. Everything about Ron had been heard from Princess Angel. Come, we have to report this matter to His Majesty. Elpha wasn't stupid. He knew that Ron now had the power of the sacred domain, even if this power didn't come from him. Finro and McStock seemed to have seen their own futures. They looked at Speck in horror and began to regret it. They had stayed in Mount Hygel. Why did they have to get involved in this mess? This heretic wasn't so easy to deal with. Ron and McStock's bodies slowly moved towards Speck. Don't kill me. Finro and McStock finally knew what the other party was going to do, and they shouted in horror. After looking at Speck, McStock realized that he was stupid. How could he compare himself to a corpse? He immediately shouted at Ron, "Ron, don't kill me. I can agree to any of your conditions. Don't kill me." On the high platform, Ron stood there expressionlessly. He looked at the two with cold eyes and said in a deep voice, "Everyone from the Holy See deserves to die." As soon as these words came out, Finro and McStock's eyes were filled with despair. At this moment, a sword flashed past like a meteor. The suction force in the sky grew stronger and stronger, and the black circle of light slowly disappeared. At this moment, countless pieces of corpses fell from the sky. These were the remains of the three masters. Without any support, all of them fell to the ground. At this moment, Slew was completely shocked. Blood splattered from the sky and stained his face. He seemed to be unconscious as his body trembled involuntarily. Three masters. These were three masters. One must know that masters were influential figures in the Holy Roman Empire. These three masters also held important positions in the Holy See. Their deaths were definitely a great loss to the Holy See. Ron had one. A wave of cheers came from the ground. Not only did it come from the Ebian rebels, but it also came from the soldiers who raised their swords and cheered. The cheers of more than 100,000 people were like the waves of the sea. For a moment, the atmosphere of the battlefield reached its peak. Juliana and Elpha looked at each other. Only then did they relax and let out a sigh of relief. The generals and soldiers of the Holy Roman Empire were ashen-faced. The fall of the three masters was a great blow to their morale. Many of them didn't know if they still had the courage to pick up the weapons in their hands. Come, we have to admit that we have lost. Slew's mouth was full of bitterness. They had lost the Battle of Rainbow Stone Castle, and he had to take responsibility for it. Perhaps this wasn't enough to remove him from his post, but it would definitely affect his future development. Let's retreat, the fat commander of the Holy Crusade army said. He was no longer in a mood to bicker with Slew. Slew nodded with difficulty. The signal to retreat was sent out. The troops of the Holy Roman Empire began to gather. Their faces were full of disappointment. Under the efforts of the officers, they began to retreat in an orderly manner. Big sister, let's pursue. On the Ebian rebels' side, Lachlan saw that the enemy had begun to retreat. He thought that it was time for him to make a contribution, so he hurriedly suggested to Juliana, "Pursue." When Juliana heard this, she pondered. She lowered her head and thought for a moment. Then she firmly shook her head and rejected Lachlan's suggestion. No, Lachlan was stunned. He didn't think that his big sister would give up such a rare opportunity in front of her. Why? Lachlan didn't understand. He stared intently at Juliana's eyes and said, "The morale of the Holy Roman Empire's army has plummeted. They're no longer in the mood to fight. This is our opportunity to attack. We don't even need Ron. As long as we rush out with the cavalry, we can definitely catch them off guard." These words sounded very reasonable. All the generals of the Ebian rebels looked at Juliana in confusion. This person who wasn't even 30 years old was like a god in their hearts. She must have her own reasons for doing this. Alpha also felt strange. However, after thinking about it carefully, he already understood Juliana's intention. He secretly admired this smart person. He immediately smiled and said, "I understand. Big sister, you mean that there is no need to pursue, right?" Juliana smiled and looked at Elpha with eyes full of praise. She said, "That's right." Lachlan looked at the two's eyes. A fire of jealousy burned in his heart. He gritted his teeth and asked, "Big sister, why?" "The reason is very simple." Before Juliana could answer, Elpha interrupted. "Big sister's goal is to open up the supply channel. If you want to make it bigger, you want to restore the kingdom of Ebia. The Ebian rebels' goal is not to fight to the death with the Holy Roman Empire. From now on, their intention to withdraw from Colored Stone Castle is very obvious. Our goal has been achieved. There is no need to continue fighting. Is that so, big sister?" When Lachlan heard this, he suddenly understood. Although continuing to fight could increase the success of the war, it was useless. Compared to the kingdom of Ebia, the Holy Roman Empire was too large. Even if 3 of its legions were destroyed, it wouldn't have much impact on the empire. In this case, the Ebian rebels would be one less army. Juliana sighed softly and said, "Lachlan, you have been with me for so long, but you still don't understand some things. You still have to learn more from Sir Elpha." Elpha smiled and said modestly, "Big sister, you flatter me." Listening to the two's flirtatious words, Lachlan's face became gloomier. Please go to the Chapter 286. The Descent of the Sacred Domain. On a high platform in the distance, Hamelin looked at the bloody corpse falling from the sky. He smiled and praised, "Well done, Ron." Hamelin changed his tone and said, "But Ron, compared to them, your strength is still too weak. You have to work harder. You have to strive to become a grand magus necromancer. Only then can you truly defeat them." Ron was about to say a few words of modesty, but his heart trembled when he heard this. He hurriedly said, "Yes, Grandpa Hamelin." Hamelin smiled. He was very satisfied with Ron's attitude. A 17-year-old grand magus necromancer was a rare existence in the Omlos continent 100,000 years ago. What was there to be dissatisfied with Ron? Just as he was about to say a few words of encouragement, his expression suddenly changed, and he raised his head to look at the sky. That is, in the vast sky, the sun had completely risen, sprinkling down rays of light. In the dazzling rays of light, an imposing figure appeared, slowly descending from the sky. A powerhouse of the sacred domain. Feeling the other party's increasingly terrifying aura, Homeland's pupils shrank, and he instantly became surprised. His heart sank. "Grandpa Homeland, why are you?" Ron said as he raised his head to look at the sky. At this moment, his face instantly froze. In the next moment, an extremely frightened expression spread across his face. Ron didn't have the ability to identify powerhouses of the sacred domain, but he had already recognized the person who had come. He had seen this person before. The Lord of the Holy Sea's Hall of Piety, a powerhouse of the sacred domain, a Firesword Saint, Wharton. He was floating in the sky, coldly staring at him. It was as if only the two of them existed in this world. Who is he? Why is he floating in the sky? He's also a master-level expert? The appearance of a majestic figure in the sky caused the Ebian rebels on the ground to whisper among themselves. They hadn't realized that danger had arrived, and they didn't expect that the person who came was a powerhouse from the sacred domain. For them, being able to see a master powerhouse was already a miracle. Besides, even a master powerhouse was no match for Ron. "It's him, Lord Wharton. He's here." Slew quickly recognized the person, and a look of surprise and joy appeared on his face. The fat general of the Holy Crusade said in astonishment, "How is that possible? Why is Lord Wharton here? Although I don't know why, it looks like they're dead for sure." A trace of hatred appeared on Slew's face. His handsome face was filled with malevolence. Wharton's appearance had already sealed the fate of some people. In the human world of the Noah continent, experts in the sacred domain were invincible. On the other side, Juliana smiled indifferently. "Another one has come to die. This one seems to be a master swordsman. By the way, is he also a member of the Holy See?" Elpha, why do you look so pale?" Juliana turned her head and frowned. No, he's not a master swordsman. He's a powerhouse from the sacred domain." Elpha looked at the person in the sky and trembled. He couldn't speak clearly. It was fine that Juliana didn't know Wharton, but how could Elpha not know a high-ranking official of the Roland Empire? A powerhouse from the sacred domain? Juliana's eyes suddenly opened wide as she cried out involuntarily. The person who came was Wharton. He had just arrived at the battlefield. At this time, the sky was filled with sunlight, illuminating his body into a golden color. He looked like a golden god of war bathed in the morning light. Quietly looking at the pieces of flesh and blood on the ground, Wharton shook his head and sighed. "Alas, in the end, I'm still one step too late." Before coming, Wharton knew that 3 master swordsmen were coming to kill Ron. When he learned of Ron's true strength, he immediately rushed over, but it was already too late. The death of the 3 master swordsmen didn't move Wharton. In fact, at his level of strength, there was nothing that could move him. His eyes moved slightly and fell on a young man named Ron. They hadn't seen each other for more than a year. Ron's slightly childish face had matured. He had dark short hair and black eyes. He was wearing a black magician's top and long pants. He held an orange magic staff in his hand. Wharton had a panoramic view of Ron's every move. He had never looked at a person so carefully before. He felt that this young man, named Ron's appearance, was very ordinary. He was the kind that wouldn't stand out in a sea of people. He didn't have the noble temperament of a noble. On the contrary, he had a trace of a strange aura. This was Ron? This was the necromancer that scared humans, orcs, elves, and magical beasts 100,000 years ago? Was this so-called necromancer really so powerful? No matter what, Wharton couldn't associate a mysterious and strange necromancer with this extremely ordinary young man in front of him. When he saw the remains of the 3 master swordsmen from the Holy See on the ground, Wharton was obviously stunned. Not long ago, he didn't think much of this young man who practiced ancient necromancy magic. The so-called pursuit was just a matter of convenience. But now, he truly felt threatened. This young man grew up very quickly. Wharton instantly concluded in his heart. After all, a year ago, he was still a child hiding from place to place. Wharton, Ron has grown up very quickly. He now has the strength to kill Master Swordsman. You must not let your guard down. Our relationship with the Scourge Church isn't a matter of strength, but an irreconcilable hatred. Pope's voice constantly reverberated in Wharton's mind. At this moment, his eyes flashed, and a strong killing intent rose from the bottom of his heart. His eyes turned blood red. He clenched his fists, and a powerful aura appeared in an instant. A terrifying power filled the entire space, and for a moment, even the surrounding space burned and became scorching hot. This was the strength of a powerhouse from the sacred domain. It was beyond the level of mortals. What's going on? What a terrifying aura! Is he really a master swordsman? At this moment, a commotion broke out among the ordinary Ebian rebels. For some reason, the appearance of this figure in the sky made them feel uneasy. So strong, so strong. The thing they were most worried about had finally happened. Looking at Wharton in the sky, Ron's body was unknowingly drenched in cold sweat. The hand holding the legendary staff couldn't help but tremble. In an instant, he felt the difference in strength between him and a powerhouse from the sacred domain. This difference made him feel despair. Ron, you can't beat him. Run. Homelin let out a long sigh. His voice sounded in Ron's heart. This feeling of powerlessness had never appeared in Homelin before. In an instant, Ron turned around and shouted, "Run! He's a powerhouse from the sacred domain." A powerhouse from the sacred domain? As soon as these words came out, a chill rose in the hearts of all the Ebian rebels. Who was a powerhouse from the sacred domain? They were absolutely invincible existences. Some of the more timid ones began to desert. After shouting, Ron's body suddenly turned into a black fog and immediately fled into the distance. What Rainbow Castle, what promise, what students, he couldn't care less about them. The most important thing now was to protect his own life. If he couldn't protect his life, then everything else was fleeting. Want to run? Seeing Ron turn into a black fog and flee into the distance, Wharton's eyes flashed. He moved, wanting to stop Ron from escaping, but at this moment, a gray figure suddenly flashed and blocked his path. It really is you, Speck. Wharton recognized the person in front of him. After knowing that you've become a powerhouse from the sacred domain, our church tried to recruit you. Who would have thought that you'd already be dead? You've even been refined into a combat puppet by evil undead magic. But Speck, do you really not recognize me? Wharton smiled and said calmly. Speck didn't answer and slowly raised the sword in his hand. A black arc of light instantly spread out and enveloped Wharton. Earth domain. Gravity imprisonment. Domain? You've actually comprehended a domain? Wharton frowned. Although he knew that Speck had become a powerhouse from the sacred domain, he also knew that Speck had never comprehended a domain. Now that a domain had suddenly appeared, he was a little surprised. But unfortunately, your domain isn't perfect. Wharton smiled and said, but Speck, since you're already dead, I won't hold back. After saying that, with a move of his hand, a dark gold-gray two-handed sword appeared in Wharton's hand. In an instant, the flames on his body suddenly surged. Wharton used the power of fire in Speck's domain, which meant that the other party's domain couldn't restrain him at all. With a sneer, Wharton raised the long sword in his hand high up, and the long sword, which was burning with raging flames, suddenly swung down. Raging flames slash. An extremely dazzling light suddenly appeared, carrying a blazing heat as it blasted toward Speck. Boom! Erotic novels, the powerful power of fire filled the air, and the black circle of light was blasted into two halves. Speck's pseudo-domain, which had always been successful, was broken by Wharton's sword. A sun-like ball of light appeared in midair. It was the power of flames that rained down from the sky. It was like the end of the world. Countless flames rained down from the sky. The people on the ground, regardless of whether they were enemies or allies, were affected. To Colored Stone Castle, this was more like a disaster. Raging flames slash didn't stop as it pressed down on Speck. Speck's figure sank like a kite with a broken string and crashed into a mountain peak. The sword swept past, and half of the mountain peak was flattened. gravel flew everywhere, and there was a loud bang. The sword of a powerhouse from the sacred domain was earth-shattering. The gap between Spec, a pseudo-powerhouse from the sacred domain, and a real powerhouse from the sacred domain was too great. With just one sword, he was seriously injured. "Run!" Seeing such terrifying power, someone among the Ebian rebels shouted. For a moment, everyone was in chaos and scrambled to run out. Juliana was dumbfounded. She didn't expect Ron's undead puppet to be defeated so quickly in front of a powerhouse from the sacred domain. According to her expectations, even if Ron lost, there would be a fierce battle. However, he was defeated in just one move. "Miss, let's run." Elpha knew how terrifying Wharton was. He wiped the sweat from his face and said. On the chaotic battlefield, Ron was also dumbfounded. He didn't expect Spec to be defeated so quickly. He originally hoped that it could resist for a while so that he could escape. Unfortunately, Wharton didn't give him a chance. Looking at the figure in the sky in a daze, Ron swallowed hard. Chapter 287. Ron's Despair. There's no other way. Try your best to escape. That expert from the sacred domain is extremely powerful. He's not someone you can deal with right now, Hummelin said. Ron nodded. His body once again turned into a cloud of black smoke as he fled. At this time, a beam of light descended from the sky. Boom! With a loud sound, Ron was forced back a few steps by the huge shockwave. His blood surged wildly, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Not far in front of Ron, a sword suddenly appeared. It was a dark gold longsword, and this longsword blocked his path. Ron was stunned when a faint voice sounded behind him. "Kid, since I'm here, don't even think about leaving. Obediently leave your life behind." Ron turned around and saw that Wharton had unknowingly appeared behind him. Wharton's face was expressionless, and he looked at Ron as if he was looking at a dead man. Cold sweat flowed down Ron's cheeks. At this moment, he felt the arrival of death. At this time, Juliana and the others had already fled the scene. The expert from the sacred domain didn't chase after them. Instead, he blocked Ron's path. Strange, this expert from the sacred domain doesn't seem to be coming for us. Looking at the expert from the sacred domain, blocking the pornographic novel in the distance, Ron and Juliana were somewhat puzzled. She had always thought that the expert from the sacred domain was here to solve the problem of the Ebian rebels once and for all, but now it seemed that this wasn't the case. Alpha also muttered, "Yes, we also misunderstood. It seems that he's coming for Ron. I really don't know why Ron has so much face. He's actually being chased by an expert from a sacred domain." Lachlan gloated as he spoke. He didn't have a good impression of Ron, but at the same time, he was a little jealous. A 17-year-old and penniless Ron had actually attracted the attention of an expert from the sacred domain. Moreover, the expert had specifically come for him. It must be known that an ordinary person like him wouldn't even be interested in a sacred domain expert. Ron, Ron. Catherine watched from the side, her hands clasped in front of her chest. Her face was full of anxiety as she silently prayed for Ron. At this time, Ron gritted his teeth and silently chanted an incantation. Wisps of black gas wrapped around his palm, and not long after, a white-boned spear appeared in his hand. He didn't stop moving as he fiercely stabbed at Wharton. Wharton sneered. He didn't move as he watched Ron's sharp-boned spear pierce his abdomen. Bang! The sharp-boned spear couldn't pierce through it all. On the contrary, cracks appeared on the bone spear that was harder than steel. Ron's eyes widened in surprise. How can this be? Wharton smiled, but didn't stop the bone spear. Instead, he said, "Very good. Ron, what other tricks do you have? Use them all. Let me see how powerful the so-called ancient necromancers are." Bastard. Ron cursed fiercely. He was enraged by Wharton's attitude. He waved the orange legendary staff in his hand, and a large number of skeleton warriors scrambled to climb out from the ground. "I'll let you see this." Ron summoned several hundred skeleton warriors in a single breath. In order to summon these skeletons, he had already used the power of his soul ring. Ron was determined to use the skeleton sea tactic to forcibly drag out the battle until he won. However, He didn't notice Homelin's grandfather's sigh from the bottom of his heart. Wharton chuckled. You're starting to summon skeletons? Interesting, these skeletons aren't as weak as the ones summoned by necromancers. But the result is the same for me. Saying this, Wharton's fist flickered with flames as he fiercely punched out. A powerful flame aura spread out in an instant, and the blazing heat melted all the skeleton warriors. They turned into black smoke and disappeared in the air. The skeleton hero didn't even have the chance to use charge before disappearing. Ron's eyes widened. The scene in front of him gave him an unimaginable shock. Those skeletons hadn't even moved, yet they were scattered with a single punch. Wharton's strength far exceeded his imagination. Homelin sighed. He had long since expected this outcome, but there was nothing he could do. Now, everything depended on the will of the heavens. Dark Night. Ron finally understood the difference in strength between the two of them. He had summoned the Dark Night this time, not hoping to delay the other party. It would be fine as long as it didn't disappear so quickly. However, things turned out as he expected. The moment the Dark Night appeared, it was vaporized. Wharton didn't even need a second to kill the Dark Night. Bone Prison, Bone Wall, Death Coil. Countless necromancy spells were cast, bombarding Wharton. Wharton had a cold smile on his face. He didn't dodge or evade, allowing Ron to frantically attack him. He stood there motionless like a rock in the wind. Ron used all his necromancy spells. He even used curses, but they had no effect on Wharton. How can this be? Ron's heart gradually sank into despair. He finally understood that in front of a powerhouse from the sacred domain, even escaping was an impossible task. Huff, huff, Ron panted heavily. Due to fear and despair, his stamina was depleting very quickly. At this moment, he already felt a bit dizzy. He no longer had the ability to cast necromancy spells. Looking at the exhausted Ron, a faint smile appeared on Wharton's face. Looks like that's all you've got. Next, it's my turn. As he spoke, he suddenly punched out. Bone Shield. How could Ron just wait for death? He silently chanted an incantation, and a bone shield instantly appeared in front of him. Without any obstruction, the sturdy bone shield was shattered by Wharton's punch. The powerful force broke through the bone shield and ruthlessly bombarded Ron's chest. With a crack, the crisp sound of his ribs rang out. Ron only felt pain in his chest. His eyes widened as he staggered back a few steps, black blood seeping out his mouth. Cough, cough, cough. Ron choked on the blood in his mouth and coughed nonstop. At the same time, he looked at Wharton with hatred. TSK. Seeing Ron in such a sorry state, Wharton's face revealed a hypocritical expression. Ron, look at you. You're only 17 years old, but you already have decent strength. Why bother practicing necromancy? Look, practicing magic is so good. We won't bother you. Now you know that practicing necromancy spells is going against the Holy See. Let me ask you, do you regret it now? Wharton smiled and suddenly raised his voice. His eyes stared unblinkingly at Ron. Cough, cough. Ron laughed bitterly. At this moment, he was ready to go all out. Suddenly, he stopped laughing. His bloodshot eyes stared fixedly at Wharton as he said word by word, I don't regret you. Wharton's calm state of mind finally fluctuated as he said angrily. Ron laughed wildly. Wharton, right? Let me tell you, if you don't kill me today, one day, I will lead the undead army to flatten Mount Hygel and turn your powerful Holy See into the dust of history. Suddenly, Ron raised his hands and shouted loudly. As long as the undead don't die, the natural disasters won't be destroyed. As long as the undead don't die, the natural disasters won't be destroyed. As long as the undead don't die, the natural disasters won't be destroyed. Waves of echoes reverberated in the valley as if they were witnessing Ron's vow. You're courting death. Wharton was finally enraged. His eyes flashed fiercely as he threw a punch at Ron. Bang! A loud sound was heard. Ron's body flew into the air like a kite with a broken string. He spat out a mouthful of blood, forming a beautiful parabola, and at the same time, his body fell heavily to the ground. Pain all over his body. Ron felt as if all the bones in his body were about to break, and his vision turned black. If he could sleep, he really wanted to sleep like this forever. On a small hill not far away, Juliana watched all this quietly. After a long time, she sighed softly. "Forget it, let's go." "Yes, miss." All the generals of the Ebian rebels obeyed the order and silently packed up their things to leave. After many days of continuous fighting, they were also very tired. The appearance of the powerhouses of the sacred domain made them understand that the war was over. Looking at Elpha on the side, Juliana said apologetically, "Lord Elpha, I'm sorry. It seems that the matter of opening the supply channel is not going to work, but I still thank you for your efforts all this time." Elpha smiled. "It's nothing. Since the powerhouses of the sacred domain are involved, we have nothing to say." Lachlan urged, "Miss, let's leave quickly. Otherwise, after the powerhouses of the sacred domain kill Ron, it will be our turn." Juliana nodded, looked at Ron sympathetically, and turned to leave. "Sister, you can't go." At this time, Catherine blocked Juliana's horse. With tears in her eyes, she begged, "Sister, I beg you, save Ron." Juliana shook her head. "Catherine, don't be naive. It's not that I don't want to save him. It's that I'm powerless, unless I'm a powerhouse of the sacred domain." But, Catherine thought that Ron had worked so hard for them for so long, and in the end, he would die. She felt very uneasy. "No buts. Catherine, hurry up and leave. It'll be too late if we're late," Juliana said faintly. Her heart was also heavy. Cough, cough. On the battlefield in the distance, the seriously injured Ron stood up with difficulty. This was due to his strong self-esteem. Even if he died, Ron would never bow to the enemy. "You're still not dead? Looking at your thin and weak appearance, I didn't expect you to be so tough. Since that's the case, I'll send you to hell." Wharton's face showed a trace of a sinister smile. At this moment, his clenched fist once again shone with the light of Do Chi. That's right. He had been playing and torturing Ron. His purpose was to see Ron's painful appearance, but now he had played enough. He wanted Ron dead. "Am I finally going to die?" A trace of a smile appeared on Ron's face. He didn't dodge and closed his eyes to wait for death. He knew that no matter what he did, he couldn't change the outcome. Facing the unparalleled powerhouse of the sacred domain, Ron's heart was already in despair. Sure enough, was power everything? Chapter 288. The Final Trump Card. Damn it, Ron cursed in his heart. Looking at the falling speck, whose body was still twitching, he suddenly had an idea. Ron tried to use his soul energy to contact Speck, but was delighted to find that Speck was still able to move. Wharton grinned as he walked closer. He raised the sword in his hand and said, "It doesn't matter whether you regret it or not. Damn heretic, your duty is not to stay in this world and harm humans, but to accompany the devil in hell. Go to hell with those pornographic novels." Wharton's eyes shone brightly, his fists flashing with flames. Boom! Just as Wharton was about to attack Ron, a gray figure suddenly pounced on him, raising the sword in his hand and fiercely swinging it towards Wharton. Sneak attack. This was a naked sneak attack. Speck, at this moment, was covered in wounds. His entire body was burned by the flame Do Chi, especially the wound on his chest. The wound was so deep that the bone could be seen. However, Speck, who had been refined into a zombie, did not have any concept of injuries. He still did not give up, and as soon as he got up, he pounced towards Wharton. Even though he was seriously injured, his fierce fighting spirit did not diminish. Damn it, these damn things are really haunting me. Seeing Speck appear again, Wharton's face was filled with anger. The flames in his hand suddenly erupted, and the dark gold sword stabbed into the ground suddenly rose into his hand. At this moment, Wharton's eyes turned golden, and the sword in his hand shone brightly, illuminating the surroundings with a fiery red light. Flame Dragon Break. Wharton held his sword horizontally, displaying a powerful flame Do Chi. Powerful fire elements crazily surged from his body. Due to the abundant energy, his muscles bulged one by one. A fire dragon appeared out of thin air as if it had a life of its own. It let out a sharp roar as if it had come from hell. The flame dragon spread its wings and lifted Wharton's body into the air. Powerful flame energy burst out in all directions, and the surrounding air became hot. The aura shook the heavens and earth, and the fire element filled the entire space. At this moment, Wharton raised his long sword and slashed down at Speck. The flame dragon roared and charged towards Speck with a powerful flame energy. In an instant, the wind and clouds on the ground surged, and a series of earth-shattering explosions sounded. The flames dissipated, revealing Speck's charred body, which was constantly emitting flames. At this moment, all the meridians in its body had been destroyed, and it could no longer stand up. Speck! Ron's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he screamed. He tried to control Speck, but found that Speck didn't respond at all. It's over. Ron closed his eyes in pain. After finally getting rid of the troublesome Speck, Wharton sighed in relief. He turned to look at Ron and sneered. Ron, no one will come to save you now. Go in peace. I'll pray for you. Wharton sneered as he approached step by step. The long sword in his hand shone with a cold light. Ron's body was seriously injured at this moment. He no longer had any strength to resist and could only retreat step by step. He felt a slight pain on his back. It turned out that he had retreated to a corner. At this moment, Ron's mind was moved, and a sturdy figure suddenly flashed in his mind. There's no other way. I can only use my final trump card. Ron gritted his teeth and didn't hesitate for long. His trembling hand reached out to the interspatial bag at his waist. Was he finally going to use it? Hummelin sighed. He naturally knew what Ron wanted to do, but he was worried that after using it, it would backfire on him. What are you trying to do? Wharton noticed Ron's unusual movement, so he immediately stood still and asked. Ron's body trembled with anger, and his face was filled with intense hatred. Your Excellency Wharton, since you forced me to this point, I have no other choice. Let's go to hell together. As he spoke, a black light shone from Ron's body. Following that, the light flickered, and a sturdy figure with a black body appeared in front of Wharton. What's this? Wharton frowned. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes, but at the same time, there was a hint of vigilance. He saw a tall and sturdy figure standing on the ground like a pillar. The muscles on his body bulged and were filled with a dark luster. His body was densely covered in dense patterns like a spider's web, firmly binding his body like a rope. What was taken out from the interspatial bag was undoubtedly a corpse. What surprised Wharton was that this corpse didn't have a head. A headless divine corpse. Ron had taken out his final trump card, and that was the headless divine corpse that had wreaked havoc in the Balarax Academy. It had even injured several powerhouses of the sacred domain. This was the strongest person Ron had seen so far. Thinking of the terrifying attack power of the headless divine corpse, Ron felt his heart palpitate. This was a battle puppet that he couldn't control. As for why, let alone Ron, even Hommelin didn't know. However, he had no other choice now. Dying at the hands of the headless divine corpse that he had refined was better than dying at the hands of Wharton. Ron was already prepared to die together with Wharton. This is my final trump card, Wharton. Even if you die now, you'll die willingly. Ron replied hatefully. Ha, these things again? Wharton looked and laughed. Interesting. A headless corpse can actually move. Necromancy is indeed mysterious. Wharton paused for a moment before saying, but do you think it can deal with me? Ha, that's wishful thinking. Let me tell you, I can defeat it in an instant. Then give it a try. Ron's eyes were filled with strong confidence. All right, I'll show you the true strength of a powerhouse of the sacred domain. It's not something that can be stopped by unorthodox things like you. Wharton raised the long sword in his hand, and a large amount of flames erupted from his body. The flames illuminated everything around him. He smiled coldly and swung his long sword at the headless divine corpse. The headless divine corpse didn't just sit there and wait for its death. At this moment, it raised its hand, and a black aura coiled around its clenched fist. Boom! The fist and sword collided. The headless divine corpse didn't have a weapon and could only rely on its own two fists. At this moment, its fists actually collided with Wharton's longsword, and a large amount of sparks burst forth. Wharton frowned. He couldn't help but be surprised to see that the headless divine corpse was actually able to block the sharp longsword with its flesh and blood. As expected, you have some skills. Again, Wharton was unconvinced. For a moment, he crazily stimulated the flame Do Chi in his body. In an instant, the flame Do Chi rose to the highest level. The long sword in his hand spun around and slashed at the headless divine corpse's armpit. Wharton's long sword swung repeatedly, mercilessly attacking the headless divine corpse's vital points. The headless divine corpse didn't show any weakness either, and used its flesh and blood to block Wharton's attacks. Boom, boom, boom. Huge explosions rang out on the battlefield. The headless divine corpse and Wharton's battle had begun. The two forces collided, causing the earth to tremble slightly. At this moment, the battlefield was filled with flames. It was like the sun, and the scorching heat even melted the ground. Although Wharton looked relaxed on the surface, he didn't show any mercy. The flame energy in his body crazily surged, and his attacks came wave after wave. Come on, come on, defeat him. Ron clenched his fists and continuously cheered for the headless divine corpse. For some reason, the headless divine corpse's evil aura had completely disappeared. It was as if its hands and feet were tied. Every time Wharton took a step forward, the headless divine corpse would take a step back. At this moment, its aura was completely suppressed by Wharton. Wharton was still a little worried. After all, there were many things about necromancy that he didn't understand. He was afraid that Ron would take out something inconceivable. It was precisely because he didn't understand it that he was afraid. But now he was completely at ease. This thing wouldn't pose any threat to him. Ron, this is your final trump card? You want to rely on it to save your life? Ha ha, how laughable. Let me break your final hope. Wharton laughed wildly. At this moment, his body suddenly erupted with flames. A golden sword aura shot out from his body and fiercely slammed into the headless divine corpse. Boom! A loud, muffled sound came from the ground. At the place where the two of them were fighting, flames spread out like waves in the sea. A powerful flame energy rushed into the sky. At this moment, Wharton had used his most prized skill, Raging Flame's city-breaking slash. A body flew out from that ball of light that was as hot as the sun. It was as fast as a cannonball. The headless divine corpse crashed into the ground and slid several dozen meters before falling heavily on the ground. Its body twitched a few times before it stopped moving. The headless divine corpse's body was covered with burn scars and wounds that were no longer bleeding. Needless to say, this was Wharton's masterpiece. The headless divine corpse was defeated after just a few dozen moves. All of this came as a great surprise to Ron. How could this be? Ron could never have imagined that the headless divine corpse that had wreaked havoc in the sky above the Balarax Academy and injured 3 Sacred Domain experts would actually be defeated. Moreover, it couldn't resist Wharton at all. Moreover, Ron also discovered that the headless divine corpse's strength had decreased by quite a bit. Wharton slowly withdrew his sword and looked at the headless divine corpse on the ground with a sneer. It's actually a battle corpse without a head. Its fighting strength is even worse than that specs. Haha, Ron, is this your so-called final trump card? Just what was going on? At this moment, Ron was completely shocked. The headless divine corpse that he'd placed high hopes on had actually appeared in such a sorry state. Was this still the powerful headless divine corpse he'd seen in the sky above the Balarax Academy? Or had that invincible headless divine corpse gone? Could it be that because it's been stored for too long, the headless divine corpse's strength has already dissipated? Ron couldn't help but think this way. He had no choice but to ask Hamelin for help. Chapter 289. After dealing with the headless corpse, Wharton sneered and slowly approached Ron with his blood-stained sword. "It's over." Ron wailed in his heart and closed his eyes. His last trump card had failed, and he no longer had any power to resist Wharton. At this moment, his mood fell from the peak to the bottom. At this moment, Wharton frowned slightly. He punched the air and suddenly bent his fingers into a claw, grabbing at the empty space beside him. "Who's sneak attacking me? Come out!" Wharton shouted, and at the same time, his hands did not stop moving. At this moment, a figure slowly appeared in the air. Ron had closed his eyes and was waiting for death. Hearing this, he opened his eyes and found that the person was Catherine. She was lifted into the air by Wharton with a painful expression on her face. "A mere assassin dares to sneak attack me? You must be tired of living." Wharton snorted coldly. You let go of her." Seeing Catherine being grabbed by Wharton, Ron was shocked and angry. Reckless thing. You'd better take care of yourself," Wharton said coldly, but he did not loosen his grip at all. "Let go of me." Wharton's hand was tightly gripped, and Catherine struggled with all her might. Unfortunately, in front of an expert from the sacred domain who surpassed everything, her struggle was futile. Where's Catherine?" Juliana had already left the colored stone castle for some time. At this moment, she inadvertently turned around and found that Catherine had already disappeared. Strange, she was clearly here just now. Elpha pondered for a moment and replied. Juliana was scared out of her wits when she heard this. Could it be? She suddenly thought of something terrifying. She gritted her teeth, turned her horse around, and ran in the direction of the colored stone castle. Big sis, big sis. Elpha and Lachlan's exclamations came from behind, but Juliana didn't seem to hear them. She rode her horse and galloped away, leaving the Ebian rebels behind. What should we do? The Ebian rebels looked at each other in dismay. As their leader, their eldest sister had left just like that without even leaving a word behind. They didn't know what to do next. I'm worried about her. I'll go back. Elpha gritted his teeth and pulled on the reins to give chase. He was well aware of how terrifying the powerhouses of the sacred domain were. He might not be able to come back once he left. However, Elpha still had some confidence. He was Mitzi's grandson. Perhaps the other party would give his grandmother some face. Seeing Elpha leave, Lachlan made up his mind and said, I'll go as well. After saying this, he also left behind 100,000 soldiers. Juliana urged her horse to gallop. Her expression became more and more anxious. At this moment, she was extremely regretful. Why? Why did I have to leave? Although leaving was the right choice from the perspective of the war, it would hurt her sister's heart. She was not unaware of Catherine's feelings for Ron. Catherine, nothing must happen to you. Juliana rode her horse and almost cried out loud. She desperately covered her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. Roar! Seeing Catherine fall into Wharton's hands, Ron roared like an enraged beast. Enduring the pain in his body, he turned his hand, and his soul energy surged. A bone spear suddenly shot out. Even though he knew it was useless, he still attacked without hesitation. Wharton's face revealed a sinister smile. He loved to see his prey struggle. He didn't seem to move, but his body suddenly burst into flames. Boom! Ron's body was sent flying and landed heavily on the ground. He couldn't get up for a long time. Looking at Ron, who was desperately trying to get up, Catherine's eyes flashed with deep regret. If it wasn't for her, Ron would have returned to the Roland Empire and wouldn't have ended up like this. Ron, I'm sorry. Catherine opened her mouth slightly and spat out a sentence with difficulty. Her voice was so soft that it couldn't be heard. Her voice wasn't loud, but Ron still heard it. His eyes reddened and he whispered, Catherine, I've never blamed you. Really? Catherine forced a smile. Maybe I'm really going to die. Before I die, I must tell you, cough, cough, cough. Because her neck was being held, Catherine's words were intermittent, and she coughed a few times from time to time. I like you. Catherine finally spat out a sentence with difficulty. Her voice was as soft as a mosquito. Boom! Ron's mind went blank. He sat there blankly, as if he had lost consciousness. before he died, he heard a beautiful confession of true love. Their encounter in the imperial city, St. Paulo, the romantic encounter in the sewers, these scenes appeared in Ron's mind like a movie. For a moment, Ron's eyes were filled with tears. Ron, I didn't expect this girl to have such deep feelings for you. Wharton laughed. He glanced at Catherine. But there's one thing you're wrong about. Falling in love with a heretic isn't a very good choice. I don't regret it. Catherine's pale face flushed. She smiled bitterly. Very well. Then, I'll send you to hell together. I can guarantee that you'll be buried together. Wharton's eyes were filled with killing intent. Seeing his hand tighten, Catherine suddenly had difficulty breathing. Her beautiful face turned purple and her consciousness gradually blurred. Let her go. At this time, an old voice sounded, scaring Wharton, who was in the middle of killing. Who? Wharton turned his head to look around, but he didn't see a single person. At this time, he saw Ron. Ron, who had been lying on the ground with serious injuries, had stood up at some point, a pair of cold eyes staring at him coldly. It's you? Wharton glanced at Ron. He was a little surprised. He wasn't surprised that Ron could still stand up, but he felt that the Ron who stood up was different from before. But what was different? He didn't come up. Ron quietly stood there. On his body, a black soul force slowly rose. He said in a hoarse voice, Let her go. Who are you? Wharton subconsciously asked. He felt that Ron was like a different person. He still had a thin figure, but his childish face revealed a trace of majesty. Majesty. Yes, Wharton was right. He actually saw majesty in Ron's eyes. This was a kind of temperament that only a superior could have. It definitely couldn't appear in a 17-year-old child. Ron didn't answer. He used his actions to show what he wanted to do. He made his move. Frost Nova. He casually used Frost Nova. Wharton's feet immediately condensed a layer of frost and froze his body. Wharton was shocked. At this time, a sharp-boned spear instantly arrived. Its target was his eyes. No! Wharton shouted in his heart. No matter how arrogant he was, he didn't dare to joke around with his vitals. He slightly tilted his head and dodged the bone spear. That was close. Because the two of them were too close, Wharton still had some lingering fear. Although he could find a priest to treat his eyes, he couldn't avoid a round of pain. At this time, he felt his hand lighten. The child in his hand had long disappeared. Taking advantage of the opportunity, when Wharton dodged, Ron saved Catherine. He dodged to the side with a shadow mist and asked, Are you okay? Catherine coughed a few times and forced a smile. Thank you, I'm fine. Ron, you saved me again. Ron smiled and didn't say anything. He let go of her hand and pointed in another direction, indicating that she should leave. Catherine nodded obediently. Her figure slowly faded and directly disappeared into the air. She knew that she would be a burden if she stayed. She was already very satisfied to be able to help Ron, to be able to save someone from the hands of a saint-level combatant, and to be able to strike at his vitals. This sort of wisdom and experience was definitely not to be underestimated. Although their strength was still the same, Wharton felt that he was fighting against a dangerous person who had experienced hundreds of battles. This feeling made him very uneasy. It's a very strange feeling. You're not Ron. Who are you? Wharton asked in a deep voice. The one controlling Ron's body was Hamelin. He felt that he had to make a move. Indeed, he admitted that even if he made a move, the chances of defeating Wharton were very slim. The difference in strength was too great. With Ron's current strength, he couldn't contain his powerful strength. Therefore, Hamelin could only desperately compress his strength and try to maintain a balance with Ron's strength. Otherwise, Ron's body would definitely collapse. However, the same strength under Hamelin's control was very different. Hamelin didn't answer his question. Since you like hell so much, you can go there and ask. With that, he waved his hand and a green fog flew towards Wharton. This was the necromancer's prize skill, Death Coil. Wharton sneered, big words. I'll beat you half to death and then slowly interrogate you. With a wave of his long sword, he split the Death Coil in half. However, the broken Death Coil was like thousands of strands of hair, entangling him again. Wharton frowned, and the flame chi on his body trembled, dispersing the death coil. Child's play. Wharton coldly snorted. His body flew out horizontally and fiercely slashed at Homelin. Hee, come. Homelin laughed. His body turned into a cloud of fog and directly disappeared. Wharton's long sword slashed empty air. Where is he? Wharton abruptly came to his senses, only to see that the person had already disappeared. While he was in a daze, he saw more than 10 magic bullets suddenly appear, giving him a big fright. It turned out that the other party had summoned more than 10 skeleton magicians at some point, catching him unprepared. Boom, boom, boom. The already destroyed, colored stone castle was once again ignited with the flames of war. The sound of weapons clashing and explosions rose and fell. For a moment, the two sides were locked in battle. Merlin was like a professional conductor. The same necromancy magic was at his fingertips, and his mastery of it had reached perfection. Ron, who had his soul in his body, was dazzled and was filled with admiration. Wharton, however, became more and more depressed. Ron, in front of him, was like a slippery loach. He couldn't even get close to him and could only take a beating. After an unknown amount of time, in an inconspicuous corner of the battlefield of Colored Stone Castle, the heavily injured headless corpse was lying on the ground, trembling uncontrollably. Chapter 290. Pornographic Novels Grandpa Homelin. Can you defeat him? Ron asked naively. The voice of God Homelin smiled bitterly. It's good enough that we were able to escape. That's right, Homelin did want to escape, but Wharton seemed to have sensed his intentions and desperately entangled him, making it impossible for him to escape. Homelin used superb tactics and mature wisdom to contend with Wharton, maintaining a stalemate. Almost every time, he barely dodged. Overall, he was still at a disadvantage. Where's Catherine? Juliana rushed back to the colorful stone castle and searched everywhere for her sister. She searched every corner but didn't find her sister, which made her a little worried. Boom! The sudden explosion gave Juliana a fright. She looked over and saw Ron's stubborn figure facing off against the sacred domain powerhouse, Wharton. Amazing, truly amazing. This Ron actually managed to hold on until now. A trace of astonishment flashed through Juliana's beautiful eyes. This necromancy magic is truly not simple. It should be known that a sacred domain powerhouse could instantly kill anyone below the sacred domain realm. Logically speaking, it was impossible for Ron to last until now. It was no wonder that Juliana was surprised. Where's Catherine? Could it be that she's already... Not seeing Catherine, Juliana's heart became flustered, and the anxious look on her face was obvious. Sister. Just when Juliana was extremely anxious, a clear voice sounded, dispelling her worries. Catherine's figure slowly appeared in the air. Catherine. Juliana was surprised and happy. She rushed over and hugged Catherine. Catherine, you've made me so worried. Sister. Catherine grew up with Juliana. The two sisters relied on each other and had a very deep relationship. At this moment, seeing that her sister had come to find her despite the danger, her eyes were a little moist. Catherine. Juliana smiled with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, it's all my fault. I didn't take your feelings into consideration. Catherine was also a little embarrassed. She whispered, Sister, I understand. In fact, Catherine knew in her heart that whether her sister left or stayed, it wouldn't change anything. The strength of a sacred domain powerhouse was just too strong. By the way, are you okay? Juliana calmed her emotions and began to carefully check Catherine to see if she was injured. It could be seen that she was still concerned about Catherine. Apart from a large bruise on her neck, there were no other injuries on Catherine's body. Juliana frowned. Catherine, where did the bruise on your neck come from? Did you fight with someone? Catherine nodded and explained the matter in detail. When she heard that Catherine had been captured by Wharton, Juliana's heart still raced, and she felt a lingering fear. Then, it was Ron who saved you again. Juliana asked with a sigh. Catherine lowered her head and softly said, "Yes." She no longer doubted Ron's character. However, in the face of such a strong enemy, she could only let out a faint sigh. The fierce battle caused a series of explosions. Juliana and Catherine felt a slight tremor where they were standing. It could be seen that the power of both sides was great. Attracted by the exciting battle, the two sisters looked into the distance. Catherine's eyes revealed an intoxicated light. She jumped up like a child. "Ron, come on, beat him." Juliana shook her head slightly. "Catherine, Ron can't win. Right now, he's just barely holding on." Catherine's eyes widened. How can it be? It looks like they're evenly matched. On the surface, Juliana's matter was more profound than Catherine's. From a tactical point of view, Ron seems to be delaying, looking for an opportunity to escape at any time. Moreover, his stamina is rapidly decreasing, so it's like that. Catherine's eyes flashed with a trace of disappointment. In her heart, Ron was almost omnipotent. Juliana sighed softly and said, "How can an expert from the sacred domain be defeated so easily? To be able to delay for so long is already very good." At this time, she pondered for a moment. "But there's one thing I'm curious about. Ron's stamina is decreasing, but his strength hasn't decreased at all. On the contrary, Wharton's stamina hasn't decreased much, but his strength has decreased a lot. What's going on?" The two sisters tilted their heads and thought for a long time, but still couldn't figure it out. Of course, they couldn't figure out the various strange things that happened to Ron, even if they racked their brains. Pa! 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 At this time, a strange movement by a broken wall not far away attracted their attention. "Sister, you over there. There seems to be someone." Catherine pointed at a place and said in surprise, "How can there be someone there?" Juliana's eyes inadvertently swept over, and her eyes widened in surprise. What is this?" A burly corpse without a head was lying there. Its body seemed to be trembling nonstop, making pa, pa, pa sounds. Its naked upper body was covered with a layer of black, spider-like things, and following the sound, it began to break into pieces. Could it be a corpse that Ron summoned? Catherine said in surprise and joy. Her figure moved, and she was about to go over. "Don't go over," Juliana shouted, and, at the same time, pulled Catherine. Her eyes widened. This thing, its terrifying power. The headless corpse lay there quietly, as if it had a life of its own, and a powerful force that made one's heart palpitate gradually spread out. Juliana's heart trembled. She felt a cold and bloody, murderous aura from this corpse. Just by being beside it, she could feel a bone-piercing chill. "Catherine, hurry! Hurry and leave here!" In the sky, Homelin controlled Ron's body to contend with Wharton, and at the same time desperately looking for an opportunity to escape. Unfortunately, every attempt failed. Wharton relied on his powerful attack power and dazzling speed to stop him time and time again. As the battle dragged on, Homelin felt that Ron's physical strength was rapidly depleting, and he was already feeling powerless. "Grandpa Homelin, are you okay?" As Homelin controlled Ron's body, his soul could only be stored in his sea of consciousness. He felt that Homelin's soul aura was a little unstable and hurriedly asked, "Ron, I'm afraid I can't hold on much longer." Homelin's voice was very low. During the battle with Wharton, he had tried to find an opportunity to escape countless times, but unfortunately, it had all ended in failure. He knew that the other party must have sensed his intentions. From the outside, Ron's appearance, he was panting heavily, and his physical strength was already exhausted. "Then what do we do?" Ron asked in alarm. Homelin didn't answer. He couldn't because Wharton's powerful attack had already arrived. Raging flames slash. Wharton finally lost his patience. At this moment, his fighting aura reached its peak, and he raised his dark gold-grade, two-handed longsword and fiercely slashed down. Shadowmist. Homelin didn't even think and used the Shadowmist. However, he didn't notice that his physical strength had already reached its limit. At this moment, A trace of dizziness appeared in his mind. No, Homelin's expression changed. He only hesitated for a moment, but the flame dragon had already swooped down, and the Shadowmist was too late. Bone shield. Homelin made a prompt decision. There was no time to escape, and he could only defend. At this moment, a huge bone shield appeared out of thin air and blocked in front of him. Boom! A powerful flame energy scattered in all directions, and the huge bone shield was shattered by Wharton's sword. The powerful force didn't stop, and it brushed past Ron's body. It was just a brush, but Ron's body fell like a kite, heavily crashing into the hillside. He rolled down and lay on the ground, motionless. Ron! At this moment, Catherine's involuntary cry rang out. She didn't even think and rushed out. Catherine! Juliana also cried out in alarm. She wanted to pull her sister, but she was too slow and didn't manage to do so. After a few jumps, she landed beside Ron. Catherine ignored the bloodstains on Ron's body and hugged his head. Ron, how are you? Are you okay? At this moment, Ron's face was pale and his breathing was weak. His condition was incomparably miserable. All the bones in his body were shattered, and his internal organs were seriously injured. There were burn marks all over his body, and blood spurted out from his mouth like a fountain. Under Wharton's terrifying attack, Homelin's soul was seriously injured, and it was directly beaten back into his body. Now, the control of the body was returned to Ron. Hearing a familiar voice, Ron opened his eyes with difficulty. It was Catherine. She smiled and said, I haven't left. Ron, seeing Ron's miserable state, Catherine shook her head, and the tears on her face fell like broken beads. She sobbed and couldn't speak. Huff, huff, huff. After taking care of Ron, Wharton also felt a wave of tiredness. Looking at Ron on the ground, his heart suddenly jumped. Calculating the time, it actually took him half an hour to take care of Ron. Necromancy is really not simple. Lord Pope was right. He can't be allowed to grow. I must kill him immediately to prevent future troubles. Thinking of this, a trace of murderous intent flashed in Wharton's eyes. Under the sunlight, a figure slowly approached. Catherine was startled and raised her head. Wharton was slowly approaching with a long sword in his hand. His eyes were filled with a strong, murderous intent. Not knowing where the courage came from, Catherine stretched out her hands in front of Ron and screamed, "You can't kill him. Stop." At the same time, another voice sounded. It was Big Sister Juliana, who had appeared in front of Wharton at some point. She held a magic staff in her left hand, and a blazing fireball gently jumped in her right hand. At this point, Juliana had no way to stay out of the matter. She could only come out, even though she thought it was useless. But she didn't expect that just like this, she would completely change Ron's impression of her. Wharton raised his head slightly, and his gaze focused. He was a little surprised at the person who had come. Big Sister Juliana? Juliana took a step back. A trace of horror flashed in her eyes. You recognize me? Wharton smiled. He indeed recognized Juliana, but he didn't need to answer. His gaze slowly fell on Catherine, and a large amount of flames appeared on his dark, golden longsword. You can't kill her. Seeing that her sister was about to die under Wharton's sword, Juliana finally panicked and screamed. Don't worry about me. You go, Ron said with difficulty. Go to hell. Wharton's face had a sneer, and he slashed at Catherine and Ron with his sword. Ron and Catherine closed their eyes in despair. At this time, a tall figure without a head appeared behind Wharton like a ghost. Under the light of the morning sun, a long shadow was drawn. Wharton seemed to have sensed something strange and was startled. He quickly turned around. What? First release without advertisement. Chapter 291. It was no wonder that Wharton was shocked. He didn't even know when the headless corpse appeared behind him. Ha ha ha. Even so, Wharton was still very confident in his own strength. He sneered, Ha ha, Ron, I didn't think that this trash of yours would still be alive. Ah, that's right. It's dead since it's here. Come, I have to completely destroy it. Wharton suddenly made his move. With a loud shout, he slashed his flaming longsword behind him. Boom! The flames on the long sword dispersed, and Wharton's monstrous flames disappeared without a trace in an instant, as if someone had grabbed him by the neck. Wharton's eyes widened. His face was full of shock, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. The headless corpse had firmly grabbed Wharton's hand, and his sword couldn't slash any further. The corpse's hand was emitting a strange black aura. The black aura wrapped around the corpse's body and completely suppressed Wharton's flaming aura. What's going on? Who the hell are you? How can you be so strong? Wharton was shocked and angry as he asked loudly. No one answered him, because the headless corpse couldn't speak. Ron raised his head with some difficulty. He was first shocked at the appearance of the headless corpse, then he laughed. So that's how it is. He finally understood why the powerful headless corpse's performance had been so poor. Run. At this time, Catherine heard her sister's anxious shout. She finally woke up from her dream. Wasn't this a good chance to escape? Catherine didn't hesitate anymore. She bent down, grabbed Ron's knees, and lifted him up. At the same time, she used the thief's haste skill and instantly escaped. Is he okay? Why does he look like he's about to die? Catherine ran to her sister's side. Juliana saw Ron's appearance and frowned. Catherine heard this and stomped her feet anxiously. Sister, he's already injured to this extent. Don't treat him like this, ugh. Juliana also felt that she had gone overboard. She laughed and said, Haha, why are you so anxious? Why do I feel like this man is closer to you than your sister? Sister. Catherine's face flushed red. If you continue to be like this, I won't follow you anymore. All right. No. Juliana waved her hand and said, his injuries are very serious. I'm afraid he'll need to find a priest to heal him. Catherine nodded. But where are the priests here? She glanced at the battlefield and said decisively, that headless monster is entangled with Wharton. This is our chance. We must leave this place immediately. Yes, sister, Catherine replied. No, there's no need. At that moment, the weak Ron finally spat out a sentence with much difficulty. When Juliana heard this, she frowned. You what? Yours. We'll die's tea if you want to die. Go ahead. Don't drag us down with you. Huh. Ron's eyes shone with confidence, and a strained smile appeared on his face. Believe me, Wharton, he's dead for sure, cough, cough. He started coughing. Catherine wiped the blood off his face with a handkerchief. You're still so stubborn. Hee. Ron smiled softly and said intermittently, blood seeping out of the corner of his mouth. I want to see him die. Ron's eyes turned cold. Juliana and Catherine shuddered and looked at each other. Wharton naturally knew that the two had left. However, he wasn't in the mood to care about it. The headless corpse in front of him was giving him a lot of pressure. Wharton's surprised expression was gradually replaced by a serious one. He felt that the headless monster was a completely different person. Furthermore, his strength had increased greatly. Damn it! Wharton's eyes turned cold. His body suddenly erupted with powerful flame, fighting aura. With a boom, he retreated and broke free from the headless corpse's grasp. Rubbing his aching hand, Wharton's eyes flashed with ferocity. Very well, then let's see how strong you are. With that, the flames on Wharton's body surged. Before Wharton could attack, the headless corpse had already pounced on him. It raised its huge fist and fiercely punched at him. The fist grew bigger and bigger in Wharton's eyes. The strange black gas in the fist's wind became thicker and thicker. Quick! Wharton had just reacted when the headless corpse was already in front of him. He had no other choice but to use his fighting aura to block it. Boom! The fist and the sword collided. Two equally powerful forces collided with each other, creating a huge explosion. For a moment, the wind and clouds changed color. The elements in the air were also attracted by this powerful force and became restless. An arc of light suddenly spread out in all directions, and the black energy mixed with the red flames continued to expand in all directions. Dust rose up from the ground, as if it had been swept away. The place they were at had been swept away. Juliana and Vivian were dumbstruck. They couldn't believe the reality in front of them. That headless monster had actually erupted with such a powerful force. It wasn't even inferior to a powerhouse from the sacred domain. Too frightening. They're both very strong. Catherine muttered. The power that burst forth in the battle between the two powerhouses made her feel how small she was. Juliana turned her head and asked, Ron, is this also your corpse puppet? How can it be so strong? Ron smiled coldly. He didn't answer, but quietly looked at the two people not far away. Wharton, this time I want you dead. Hee. The Holy See lost a powerhouse from the sacred domain. I'm afraid they'll be extremely angry. In a battle just now, Wharton had suffered a loss. This ignited his fighting spirit. You're indeed a worthy opponent. Come, I want to kill Ron, but I have to defeat you first. As if sensing the opponent's strong fighting spirit, the headless corpse clenched its fists. A powerful force with a destructive aura spread out. At the same time, its aura was also rising steadily. Whoosh! Two figures rushed into the sky, one black and one red. They instantly rose into the air and then began to fiercely shake. Boom! 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 Between heaven and earth, the wind and clouds changed color. The two powerful forces fought in the air. Traces of slight tremors appeared on the ground. The rumbling sounds of the forces colliding in the air were so loud that it made people's eardrums ring. Sir, it's been so long. I think we should go back. A soldier of the 19th Legion said respectfully to Slough. Slough pondered for a moment. That's right. I think Sir Wharton should have dealt with those heretics. Shall we go back now? He turned his head slightly and asked for the opinions of the other two Legion commanders. This was also his brilliance. No matter what, it was the decision of the three of them to drag the other two into the water. After this battle, Slough also learned to be obedient. It was better to find a few more people to take the blame. The other two didn't have any objections, so they decided to go back the way they came. All kinds of orders rose and fell. The army of tens of thousands turned around and advanced in the direction of Colored Stone Castle. Since the heretics had been dealt with, someone had to go back and clean up the situation. Tens of thousands of people advanced at the same time, like a long snake slowly moving through the mountains. When they were about to reach Colored Stone Castle, a loud noise came from the sky. Wow, what's that? Two figures. Is the battle not over yet? I think one of them is Sir Wharton. Who's the other one? I don't know. Ah, that guy doesn't have a head. Evil heretic. At this time, the soldiers of the Holy Roman Empire began to talk. Their faces gradually showed signs of panic. To be able to fight with Sir Wharton in the sky, this guy had to at least be a F*** pornographic novel from the sacred domain. Strength. Which idiot suggested to go back just now? Sir, there's still a battle in the sky. It seems to be a powerhouse from the sacred domain. The soldier said hurriedly. He looked embarrassed. He was the one who suggested to go back. I'm here. Slough stroked his chin lightly. What's with that headless guy? Is it something Ron summoned with his evil undead magic? He glanced at the noisy soldiers around him and scolded with dissatisfaction. Quiet down. What's with the noise? The others haven't even fought here yet. When the soldiers heard this, they quieted down a little. However, they were still afraid. Many of their legs were trembling. The fat commander of the Holy Crusade came to Slough's side and wiped his fat face. He asked, Sir Slough, what do we do now? Slough glanced at him. Wait and see. Boom! After another clash of strength, the two figures separated. Wharton retreated a few meters with the wind. Looking at the headless corpse, his eyes were filled with horror. Damn it, this guy is so F*** hard to deal with. Wharton cursed fiercely. He realized that as the battle unfolded, the terrifying corpse's strength became stronger and stronger. It was as if it had gone mad and chased after him relentlessly. He was a little overwhelmed. The pattern began to disappear. When the pattern completely disappeared, the black gas on the headless corpse's body suddenly skyrocketed. The pattern on the headless corpse's body was the seal that Ron had placed on it. When Ron took it out of the space bag, he forgot to remove the seal. Thus, the headless corpse's strength was suppressed. However, The headless corpse's innate ferocious aura allowed it to break the seal. When the seal was completely removed, its powerful strength was finally revealed without reservation. At this moment, an extremely frightening aura filled every corner of the battlefield. Everyone within a 10-mile radius felt an inexplicable chill in their hearts. This power was too strong. Everyone felt that they were invincible. The appearance of this power brought destruction to the world. The god of destruction. This was the legendary power of the god of destruction. No advertisement, please come first. Chapter 292. How is this possible? Wharton's expression finally changed from shock to fear. In the next moment, his body began to tremble in fear. What is this? What kind of power is this? The world spun. The sun and moon lost their light. The divine power of destruction from hell was not a power that belonged to this world. Everyone on the ground was stunned. They had never seen such a terrifying power before. This kind of power even surpassed that of the experts of the sacred domain. This is too scary, Ron. Is this really the power of the corpse puppet you summoned? Catherine clasped her hands in front of her chest, her eyes filled with admiration. Ron shook his head. Although it is a corpse puppet refined by me, I don't have the ability to control it. He bit his lips. If it goes crazy in the next moment, I won't have the ability to stop it. Damn it, damn it. How is this possible? How can there be such powerful power? Wharton gnashed his teeth. The hand holding the sword also began to tremble. His heart was filled with fear. Impossible. This must be an illusion. It must be. Thinking of his mission, Wharton's fearful heart became firm again. He inwardly encouraged himself. Ron is only a 17-year-old child. How can he have such powerful power? Impossible. As he spoke, a powerful flame energy erupted from Wharton's body. Like a ball of light, the surrounding air began to burn. He raised the dark gold longsword with his trembling hand. A powerful flame energy condensed, and the broadsword became as bright as the sun. Flame dragon break. With a wave of the longsword in his hand, a huge flame dragon emerged from his body. With a powerful flame energy, it fiercely blasted towards the headless corpse. At this moment, Wharton's face was filled with a strange malevolence. Go to hell, evil heretic! Facing Wharton's powerful attack, the headless corpse did not panic. He slowly raised his hand, and a trace of divine power of destruction wrapped around his fingertips. Then he clenched his fist, and a powerful fist energy erupted from his body. Fist of destruction. A powerful destructive force erupted, and the headless corpse turned into a huge black ball of light, illuminating the clear sky until it was as dark as night. For a moment, the people on the ground felt as if Doomsday had arrived. It was a power that could destroy the heavens and earth. Streaks of purple lightning filled the sky, and the destructive power filled with the aura of death directly shrouded down, tightly entangling that black pillar-like fist force. It forcefully clashed with Wharton's sacred domain level fighting technique. At this moment, Ron's eyebrows twitched, and a bad feeling flashed through his heart. He hurriedly said, "It's dangerous. Let's go." Oh, yes. Upon hearing this, Catherine immediately picked up Ron and was about to dash out. Follow me. Catherine was fast, but Juliana was faster. She hugged the two of them, and with a thought, the sorcerer's teleportation was released quickly, and they disappeared in a flash. Boom! The black light pierced through the sky as if Doomsday had arrived. In an instant, there was silence in the sky. Then, a thunderous sound resounded in the sky as a powerful, destructive divine power swept out. Huh? What's that? When they were far away, the fat commander of the Holy Crusade Army of Order frowned and said to a large cloud of dust in the distance that was constantly approaching. Slew's eyes suddenly widened, and he cried out involuntarily, "No! That's the aftermath of the explosion. Everyone dodge." No matter how timely Slew's warning was, for an army of tens of thousands of people, dodging was not something that could be done with just a few words. For a moment, there was a slight commotion among the tens of thousands of people in the three armies. Amidst the chaos, a powerful shockwave arrived. Like a typhoon, it blew all the men and horses into the air. Some of the soldiers screamed as they were swept into the air. They then fell heavily to the ground and breathed their last. That was close. Ron, Catherine, and Juliana appeared in a safe place. The place where they were just now had turned into ruins, and a strange black power filled it. They breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. Catherine patted her chest and said with lingering fear, "The power of the powerhouses in the sacred domain is too terrifying. We are simply like ants in front of them." That power, Juliana pondered for a moment and said, "I'm afraid it's beyond the sacred domain." The two of them then looked at Ron. Ron smiled bitterly. "Don't ask me, I don't know anything." After a short rest, Ron had recovered some of his energy and his words were more fluent. Seeing that he refused, the two sisters were a little helpless. Catherine did not say anything, but Juliana curled her lips in dissatisfaction. She knew that Ron had a deep prejudice against her. At this time, the power storm in the sky had subsided, and the earth had returned to its Guangming state. The smoke and dust dispersed, revealing the devastated colored stone castle. When the survivors saw the scene in front of them, they were stunned. The entire colored stone castle had completely disappeared, and in its place was a super large pit about 20 meters deep. The walls of the pit looked as if they had been cut by a knife, and were incomparably flat. Before the battle, all the people in Colored Stone Castle had actually evacuated. Otherwise, they would have been buried with the entire Colored Stone Castle. Slew was dumbfounded. This destructive power is too terrifying. Is this really the power of the sacred domain? You, Lord Wharton. At this time, a soldier beside him pointed to the sky and exclaimed. Everyone raised their heads and looked at the sky. Suddenly, the scene in front of them shocked them. At this time, Wharton was quite miserable. His hair was messy, his clothes were tattered, and his body was covered in blood. The dark gold two-handed sword in his hand was thrown away, and he looked very miserable. His eyes were wide open, and his body was trembling with fear. The difference in strength was too great. Wharton couldn't forget the scene just now. When a huge flame dragon met the black power of the opponent, it melted like snow in the spring. It didn't have any effect at all. The black power seemed to be invincible. After scattering his power, it continued to penetrate. As if hit by a sledgehammer, the powerful power passed through his body. At that moment, Wharton felt as if death was coming. The weapon in his hand couldn't withstand that terrifying power and disappeared like glass fragments. What kind of power was this? It was too powerful, too terrifying. Was this really the power of a human? Wharton considered himself to be very experienced, but he really couldn't figure out the source of the power of the corpse in front of him, nor its profession. With just a casual blow, Wharton was seriously injured. On the surface, the injuries on his body weren't serious, but his muscles and internal organs had been destroyed by the destruction divine power. He also spent a lot of effort to expel the remnants of the destruction divine power. Run! A thought appeared in Wharton's mind. Although the mission was not completed, no mission was more important than his own life. He now understood that he was no match for this strange, headless corpse. With a sudden turn of his head, Wharton's figure turned into a stream of light and disappeared. Ever since he became a sacred domain, this was the first time he had been defeated so miserably. Damn it, what the hell is this headless corpse? Its strength is so terrifying. Although he was seriously injured, Wharton wasn't afraid of his speed at all. He was still very confident in his own speed. Thinking that he didn't complete the mission given to him by Pope, Wharton was extremely unwilling. Ron, count yourself lucky this time. Next time, he thought bitterly as he flew. Wharton's escape was both unexpected and expected at the same time. The strength of the corpse that came out of nowhere was too terrifying. Slew took to the sky and helplessly shook his head. Let's go. We won't have the chance to take back Rainbow Stone Castle. As soon as he said that, everyone had the same feeling. Under such circumstances, not to mention taking back Rainbow Stone Castle. It would be good enough if they could keep their lives. He actually escaped. Catherine raised her fist with a face full of unwillingness. She pointed to the sky and fiercely cursed. Humph. Count yourself lucky. Forget it, let him be. Ron was also unwilling, but he had no choice but to watch Wharton escape. The headless corpse wasn't like Speck. It didn't listen to his orders. It was strange. As soon as this thought appeared in Ron's mind, it was as if he had sensed something, and his heart suddenly jumped. At this time, the headless corpse moved. It slowly tightened its body, and a black energy wrapped around its body. Boom! Under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, the headless corpse disappeared into the horizon. It actually chased after Wharton. Wharton, who had escaped, was inwardly rejoicing. He was flying with all his strength, wanting to quickly find a place to heal. At this time, with a whoosh, a black ray of light swept past him, its speed more than twice as fast as him. At this time, a stalwart figure blocked his path. What? Wharton was shocked. He rubbed his eyes. There was no mistaking it. The terrifying headless corpse had caught up with him and was blocking his path. This is impossible. The shock in Wharton's heart couldn't be any greater. Logically speaking, when a Saint-level combatant was fleeing at full speed, the chances of another Saint-level combatant catching up to him was less than 10%. However, that terrifying corpse actually caught up so quickly. What? What do you want to do? Wharton's eyes were filled with fear. He trembled as he took a step back. There was no answer. The headless corpse didn't know how to speak. At this time, it suddenly stretched out its two large hands. Don't come here to read dirty novels. Wharton retreated in panic, wanting to avoid the headless corpse's powerful arms. However, he was horrified to find that he couldn't move his body. The headless corpse's left hand grabbed his neck and lifted him up as if he was a chicken. Let go of me, you bastard. Die. Wharton's body suddenly exploded with intense flames. He struggled with all his might, but no matter what he did, he couldn't break free from the headless corpse's large hands. At this time, the headless corpse slowly raised its right fist. On its fist, a sharp black light flickered, and traces of killing intent unknowingly spread out. Wharton finally understood what the other party wanted to do. His eyes were about to pop out of their sockets as he fearfully shouted, "No, don't kill me." Boom! The headless corpse's fist mercilessly punched out. The black destructive power directly penetrated Wharton's head. In an instant, Wharton's head cracked open like a watermelon. This time, even if he was a sacred domain expert, he wouldn't be able to come back to life. After the powerful black beam exploded Wharton's head, it disappeared into the horizon. What? Slew's body shook violently, his eyes wide open. Chapter 293. At this moment, the entire colored stone castle was silent. They stared blankly at the black body falling to the ground with a dull thud. A powerhouse from the sacred domain. Many of them had yet to recover from the shock after witnessing the fall of a Saint Realm powerhouse who was so powerful that it was suffocating. This, Silo's heart was thumping nonstop. He pointed at the sky, dumbfounded and speechless. "Sir, what do we do now?" At this moment, the soldiers who had rested came forward and asked. "Retreat immediately," Slew ordered without hesitation. No one had any objections. In less than 15 minutes, all the troops of the Holy Roman Empire had retreated. At this moment, the headless corpse moved and descended like a demon god. It landed in front of the three of them and suddenly stopped. What a powerful aura! The destructive power of the headless corpse made the two sisters tremble. Juliana revealed an envious expression. She wished she could have a corpse puppet like this. For a moment, she couldn't help but want to learn necromancy. But then she smiled bitterly. That was an impossible thing. Everyone, watch out. Seeing the headless corpse falling from the sky, Ron's expression changed greatly. "What's wrong?" Catherine asked. Looking at Ron's terrified expression and the headless corpse, she asked in confusion, "This is nothing." Ron was also surprised. Wasn't this headless corpse always out of his control? How could it be this time? He tried to control the headless corpse. Under his efforts, the corpse slowly raised a hand. Ga. Ron was surprised and happy. Didn't this mean that he could finally control the headless corpse? Thinking about how this powerful zombie that could kill a powerhouse from the sacred domain had finally become his puppet, Ron's face bloomed with joy. He immediately shared this news with Grandpa Homelin. However, after calling out a few times, Grandpa Homelin didn't respond. He had consumed a lot of energy in the battle with Wharton, and his soul power was also damaged. He had already returned to the Soul Ring to rest. Big Sister. At this moment, Alpha and Lachlan finally arrived. Seeing that the two of them were fine, they were very happy. Seeing that the colored stone castle had disappeared, Lachlan sighed in his heart. He asked, "Big Sister, what do we do now?" Juliana looked at Alpha. Alpha smiled. "Although the colored stone castle is no longer here, fortunately, our supply channel is open. The plan is complete. The next step, our Roland Empire's aid, supplies from the border cities to your hands." "That's great." Juliana's eyes shone. She had been looking forward to this day for a long time. For many years, she had been asking for help everywhere, but she had been repeatedly rejected. She was already discouraged. This time, with Alpha's help, the Roland Empire had finally officially intervened. After the supply channel was opened, the Ebian rebels' territories were finally connected. They didn't have to hide anymore. With the support of the Roland Empire supplies, unifying the kingdom of Ebia was just around the corner. Thinking of this, Juliana was full of confidence for the future. She looked at Alpha with a trace of sweet affection in her eyes. Lachlan saw all of this and went crazy with jealousy. At this moment, Catherine said worriedly, "Big Sister, if the Holy Roman Empire makes a comeback, what should we do? Even the Holy See has intervened." Alpha smiled. "There's no need to worry. I believe that the Holy Roman Empire and the Holy See will be very cautious about the death of a powerhouse from the sacred domain here. They probably won't make any big moves during this period of time. The death of a powerhouse from the sacred domain was a great loss to the Holy See." However, Ron couldn't care less at this time. After all, they had already fallen out with each other. What's more, with the headless corpse, Ron was no longer afraid of them. "Don't we still have Ron?" Alpha changed the topic and winked at Juliana. Juliana understood and hurriedly said with a smile, "Ron, stay. If you can help us restore the kingdom of Ebia, you will be the prince of our country." Ron shook his head. "I'm sorry, I'm not interested." This, Juliana looked at Alpha helplessly. Alpha spread his hands, indicating that there was nothing he could do. She could only look at her sister for help. It would be more effective to let Catherine persuade Ron to stay. Juliana knew that Ron still treated her sister very well. However, this time, Catherine deliberately ignored her sister's pleading look. Instead, she said, "Ron, I will keep my promise and let the children follow you back to the academy. When the time comes, I will go to the academy to meet you." Ron understood. He smiled at Catherine and said softly, "Thank you, Catherine." A wave of warmth rose in Catherine's heart. She blushed and lowered her head in embarrassment, but her heart was filled with sweetness. Juliana's face had completely fallen. She thought viciously, "You damned girl, you don't want your sister anymore now that you have a man. To think that I usually treat you so." With the headless divine corpse, Ron was no longer afraid of being threatened by anyone. His gaze slowly swept across everyone. Those people's faces were filled with resentment. No one dared to offend him. Even Lachlan, who had always disliked him, lowered his head and smiled sheepishly. This was strength. This was strength. For the first time, Ron enjoyed the taste of strength. Although this strength did not belong to him, in the eyes of others, he was undoubtedly a sacred domain. "Where are Paige and the others?" Ron asked proudly. Unconsciously, there was a hint of authority in his voice. No one noticed this. On the contrary, they felt that it was natural. Juliana glanced at the headless divine corpse beside her. There was a hint of fear in her eyes. Her words were heartfelt. At the same time, she wanted to make a final effort. "Ron, Your injuries are so serious. I'll go back to Dawn City to heal first. I'll find you a priest, no need. Let them come over. I'll take them and leave immediately, Ron said without hesitation. Juliana was stunned. But your injuries, Ron smiled. He took out the zombie Aryan from his space bag. Under everyone's astonished gazes, his injuries were quickly healed. Then, he used Death Coil to heal Spec. After doing all this, Ron turned back and said coldly to Juliana, "Can I leave now?" Juliana had no choice. Only then did she inform the Vivian and the children who had been following the Ebian rebels to bring them over and hand them over to Ron. The children were very happy to see Ron show off his invincible power. They were full of anticipation for their future trip to Balavax. Mount Hyjal, Temple of Gods. Bang! A cup fell heavily to the ground and shattered into pieces. What are you? Pope Ernst was wearing a bright red robe. At this moment, he was full of shock and confusion. There was also a trace of intense anger. The servant in front of Ernst was obviously frightened. He trembled as he said, "Lord Pope, according to the news from Ebia, Lord Wharton. Lord Wharton has. Lord Pope, please take care of yourself." Although he did not say those two words, Pope had already guessed it. He closed his eyes in pain and sat weakly on the throne. Impossible. How did Wharton die? How could Ron kill Wharton? Pornographic novels, Ernst took a deep breath. With these questions in mind, his gaze fell on the battle report in the servant's hand. He whispered, "Bring that report to me." "Yes, Lord Pope, it's here." The servant presented the report in his hand. Ernst held the report in his hand and endured the pain in his heart. He read the battle report line by line very carefully, not missing a single word. The report was presented by a legion commander named Slew. When he presented the report to the Holy Roman Empire, he also presented a copy to the Holy See. In the Holy See's report, the names of the Holy Crusades generals were also signed. This meant that the battle report was credible. The contents of the battle report were very detailed. It described the course of the battle between the two sides, including Wharton's death. Slew did not dare to hide anything and reported everything in full detail. After finishing the report, Pope Ernst looked as if he had aged a few decades in an instant. He collapsed on the throne with a pained expression, and the battle report in his hand fell to the ground. "Lord Pope, the matter has been reported. Take care of yourself." The servant came up and whispered, "I'm fine." Pope Ernst waved his hand lightly. "Go and call them over." "We're having a meeting," the servant nodded. He naturally knew who the them Lord Pope was talking about. At a large rectangular table, all the hall masters of the Holy Nine Halls were gathered together. The Hall of Prophecy, Pope Ernst. The Hall of Judgment, Guangming Judge Nord. The Hall of Judgment, Guangming Judge Ivan. The Hall of Honor, Sacred Knight Commander Boulder. The Hall of Order, Guangming Consul Oliver. The Hall of Redemption, Priest Imina. The Hall of Protection, Guard Commander Herring. And the Hall of Faith, Archbishop Dokit. Only the Hall of Piety's seat was empty. That was Wharton's seat, but he was no longer there. The atmosphere was a little heavy. Except for Pope, everyone had just received the news. Wharton's departure was a huge blow to the Holy See. Although there were factions in the Holy See, and although some of the Nine Hall Masters might be dissatisfied with Wharton, to outsiders, losing Wharton meant that the Holy See's strength had dropped by a level, from 9 sacred domain powerhouses to 8. This was a huge blow to the Holy See. "Come on." Pope Ernst sighed and was the first to break the silence. His voice was a little hoarse. Anger and sadness are not the solution. The key now is how to deal with the aftermath. Please go to Chapter 294. Come on. Ron has grown into a tough opponent. The Judge of Light, the judge at this time, in the Hall of Honor, the leader of the Holy Knights, Boulder, stood up and walked out without saying a word. Pope Ernst frowned. "Sir Boulder, where are you going?" Boulder's body froze. When he came back to his senses, a trace of murderous intent flashed through his eyes. "Your Holiness the Pope, is there a need for this? I want to kill Ron and avenge Wharton. If the powerhouses of the Roland Empire are determined to shelter the heretic Ron, I don't mind killing them all, even if it means starting a war with the Roland Empire. Your Holiness, Pope, leave this matter to me. Boulder's face was calm, but his voice was firm and powerful. Pope Ernst's face gradually tightened. I'll go too. Imena also stood up. Sit down. Ernst's voice wasn't loud, but it was full of dignity. Imena was stunned. Sir Pope, sit down. The scepter in Ernst's hand paused, and he showed a rare display of anger. Seeing that Pope was angry, Boulder and Imena looked at each other and obediently sat down. They didn't dare to disobey the Pope's orders. Pope Ernst's face relaxed a little. He calmed down and said, I know that you have a good relationship with Wharton. I can understand your desire to avenge Wharton. If it was before, I definitely wouldn't stop you, but now, the situation has changed. Do you know how Wharton died? Ernst asked meaningfully. Boulder and Imena shook their heads. They had just received the news and hadn't had time to calm down. After thinking carefully, they realized that there were many things wrong with the matter. Could it be that Ron has already become a powerhouse of the sacred domain? Imena asked coldly. Boulder also turned to look at him, eager to get an answer from Pope. No. Pope shook his head and sighed. According to the battle reports from the front lines, Ron has the ability to turn corpses into warriors. Turn corpses into warriors? Imena was finally moved. She fiercely gritted her teeth. That's right. Such evil magic and rituals can only be done by the devil. As far as I know, the combat strength of those corpses is closely related to their previous strength. At this time, Ron has an extremely powerful corpse in his hands, so much so that... At this point, the Pope paused, his face revealing a pained expression. At this point, everyone understood that even Wharton couldn't defeat the powerful corpse. Boulder and Imena didn't stand a chance either. At this time, the two finally calmed down and began to look at their opponent, Ron. Imena was shocked to find that Ron could no longer be treated as an ordinary teenager who practiced necromancy magic. The one in front of them was a genuine powerhouse of the sacred domain, and Wharton couldn't even escape from that corpse. This meant that the corpse's strength might even be stronger than a powerhouse of the sacred domain. Boulder's tone also softened. Lord Pope, is there no way for us to just let the matter of Wharton go? Of course I can't just let it go like this. Pope Ernst suppressed a trace of anger in his voice. Wharton's death is related to the Holy See's reputation. If everyone in the world knows that the Holy See did nothing after the death of a powerhouse of the sacred domain, what will they do to us? Pope's words were very honest. His words made everyone unable to raise their heads, and they all fell silent. At this time, Guangming Inquisition Chief Ivan, who had been silent all this time, said, Then, Your Holiness Pope, what do you plan to do? Pope Ernst slowly raised his head, a trace of light in his cloudy eyes. His gaze swept across everyone, and he said coldly, Ron's appearance is the greatest enemy the Holy See has ever faced in the past 1,000 years. Due to our previous negligence, he has now completely matured. I, as the person in charge of the Holy See, undoubtedly have to take responsibility for this. After Ernst finished, he slowly stood up and took off the Guangming crown on his head. Everyone looked at each other and secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. At this time, Ernst's old voice sounded again. Ron's appearance has disrupted the order of the world, challenging Guangming and justice. When the world falls into the claws of darkness and evil, it will be the root of the fall of mankind. At this time, Pope straightened his body. As the people of God Guangming, the embodiment of justice, we have the responsibility to expel all evil and rescue the souls of mankind from hell. Ernst's words were full of righteousness, powerful and resonating. His stance received the unanimous approval of everyone present. At this time, Guangming Chief Judge Nord stood up and said, The top priority is to communicate with the Roland Empire as soon as possible and ask them to hand over Ron in the name of the Holy See. Yes, Guangming Inquisition Chief Ivan said. In addition, I want to add that the news must be blocked as soon as possible, and the truth that Ron has the ability to kill Wharton must not be known. Imena frowned and asked, There are 100,000 people in the Colored Stone Castle who watch this battle. How can we block it? Ernst sighed, Let's do our best. This is the Balarax Academy. In front of the gate of the Balarax Academy, Ron pointed at the academy and said to the 124 students behind him. These students wore tattered clothes and looked like a group of beggars from afar, but there was a trace of fanaticism and piety in their eyes. A burst of exclamations came from the mouths of these students. The door was not majestic and dignified, but a thick smell of books blew in their faces. The sound of reading coming from inside sounded so pleasant to their ears. The eyes of the children shone brightly. This was the palace in their hearts. So beautiful. Page size shone. Thinking that he would spend a few years here, he became excited. Sister, have you arrived? I've finally arrived at the Balarax Academy, and I'm studying necromancy, true necromancy. Stepping through the gate and walking on the wide road, the students of the Balarax Academy consciously opened up a path. They looked at the commoner children from Ebia in amazement. What's going on? How could the academy allow a group of beggars to walk in? A noble student was full of indignation. Walking with these people seemed to be a disgrace to his status. Shoo! Lower your voice. Did you see the one walking in front? He's Ron. Another student said in a low voice. He's Ron, the champion of the last academy ranking tournament. He only studied at the Balarax Academy for a year, and he's already a teacher. Ron, that legendary necromancer? Didn't he go out to recruit? Oh, I understand now. These are their studies. The aristocrat was enlightened. Vivian, bring them to the dormitory to settle down. I'll go find Vice Dean Dabbs, Ron said to Vivian after bringing his students around the academy. Okay. Vivian smiled and agreed. As a teacher for many years, she was very familiar with the academy system and knew the recruitment procedures. Dong, dong, dong. Come in. Dabbs was extremely busy. When Ron knocked on the door and entered, he was still complaining about why there were so many things happening this year. Vice Dean Dabbs. Ron smiled as he walked in. MM. When Dabbs heard this voice, he felt that it was strange yet familiar. He raised his head and stared blankly for a moment before saying happily, Ron, you're back. Ron nodded and smiled. I just came back. Dabbs smiled. Your face is full of joy. The recruitment must have gone well. It went well. I recruited 124 students. Ron said, 124 students, that's not bad. It's good that you got them. Dabbs muttered to himself for a moment before smiling. Our necromancy major has never had so many students. When Ron successfully became a necromancy magic teacher, Dabbs was sincerely happy for him. He was also very interested in necromancy magic. Bring them to go through the procedures first. I'll take care of the rest. Dabbs said, Pornographic novels, thank you, Vice Dean. That's all. Dabbs waved his hand. I still have some things to do. I'll look for you after I'm done. After a while, Dabbs raised his head and saw that Ron was still there. He frowned and said unhappily, Ron, why are you still here? Can't you see that I'm busy? This. Vice Dean, Ron said with some embarrassment. I still have a very important matter. It's like this. Can you introduce me to Dean Platts? As an expert of the sacred domain, Dean Platts was naturally not someone anyone could meet. He was the only one who could meet others, and no one else could meet him. With Ron's status, he needed Vice Dean Dabbs to introduce him. Meet Dean. Dabbs opened his eyes wide in shock. Dean's time is very precious. Do you have something important to do? Ron nodded. Yes, it's something important. What is it? Let's hear it. Dabbs said disapprovingly. This. Ron hesitated for a moment before stammering, I accidentally killed an expert of the sacred domain. PFFF. Before Dabbs could finish listening, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell backward. Ron panicked. Vice Dean, what happened? After getting to the bottom of the matter, Dabbs did not dare to be negligent. He had Ron wait in the office while he reported the matter to Dean Platts. When Platts heard this, he immediately summoned Ron. In Dean Platts' office, the dean had a long conversation with him. During the conversation, Dabbs, as the vice dean, did not have the right to listen in. Only the dean and Ron knew the contents of the conversation. Early the next morning, Ron appeared in the necromancy major's classroom in high spirits. "Teacher Ron." The necromancy major students were already seated. The usually empty classroom was suddenly filled with people, and Ron was not used to it. On the lectern of the necromancy major's classroom, Ron was filled with emotions as he looked at the pairs of eyes that thirsted for knowledge. He cleared his throat and said, "Students, first of all, congratulations. From today onwards, you are all students of the Balarax Academy." Applause sounded, and all the students' faces were brimming with excitement. As Ron's assistant teacher, Vivian's face was filled with tears. She had persevered for this day for too long. For the first time in 100,000 years, necromancy magic appeared on the lectern. Homelin's figure appeared behind Ron and smiled at the excited children. He gave Ron a look of approval, and with a smile in his eyes, his figure gradually disappeared and returned to the soul ring. This was a stage that belonged to Ron. He would shine on this stage. Ron smiled and waved his hand, having everyone quiet down. He continued, "Now that everyone knows me, I won't say anything unnecessary. Now let us begin the lesson. Open the book on your desk. The first page of Necromancy Overview. The author of this book is a true master of necromancy magic. His strength has reached the sacred domain. His name is Homelin, and he is also my teacher." Ron changed the topic and introduced Homelin. "Ah!" Gasps of surprise came from the classroom. They did not expect that the one teaching necromancy magic was actually a powerhouse of the sacred domain. They were even more motivated to learn. "We have already learned the true cultivation and use of soul power. Now, we will talk about the application of necromancy magic in actual combat. Skeleton Summoning Technique, end of Volume 3. Please go to Without Advertisement." Chapter 295. The Blue Sea, the Clear Sky. The busy Buzinlita Harbor was a natural harbor in the kingdom of magical beasts Yasia archipelago to the west of the Noah continent. Countless ships were docked here, preparing for the day. On a clear morning, countless fishermen were busy in their respective boats, preparing to sail out to sea in search of their fortune in the vast sea. Suddenly, as if there was an unexpected storm, the clear sky suddenly darkened, and the entire Buzinlita harbor was filled with a solemn atmosphere. A thunderous roar came from the sky, and a huge figure appeared from the horizon. It had 4 strong limbs for huge claws that emitted a cold light, and a pair of huge wings that flapped gently in the wind. It flew towards one of the peaks of the Yasia archipelago. "Hey, you guys, what is that?" A young fisherman pointed to the sky and cried out. He rubbed his eyes. "What did I just see? Oh my God, I actually saw a dragon." "What? Is it really a dragon? The legendary dragons of the magical beasts?" Another young man said in surprise. More figures appeared in the sky. This time, it wasn't just the dragons. Some legendary magical beasts also began to appear, such as the Hydra, which was good at using many kinds of magical elements, and the poison manicore lion, which had a poisonous scorpion tail, fleshy wings, and could fly. Among these magical beasts, the weakest was from the sacred domain. A large number of magical beasts from the sacred domain suddenly appeared on this island, and the calm harbor suddenly became turbulent. The ships swayed gently in the waves, and many fishermen began to panic. What's going on with so many magical beasts? Are they preparing to destroy this island? A fisherman grabbed the mast and shouted, his voice filled with the fear of death. Any one of those magical beasts had the ability to destroy everything here. Shocking pornographic novel. Strange. An old fisherman only raised his head slightly, and then lowered his head to do his own thing. He didn't even raise his head as he said, "What's wrong with this? It's just a joint conference of the Noah continent held on this island." Joint conference? A young fisherman widened his eyes in surprise. "What's going on?" "Haha, the Yasia archipelago is where the joint conference is held every 10 years. Experts from all sides come to discuss matters that decide the fate of the Noah continent." The old fisherman laughed. "Decide the fate of the Noah continent?" The young fisherman was even more surprised. "Haha, you wouldn't understand." The old fisherman straightened up. "Anyway, They have no ill intentions towards us. We just need to do our own thing. The old fisherman didn't go down because he was afraid of being exposed. After all, he was someone who made a living at sea and didn't know much. The Noah Continent's assembly was formed by the powerhouses of the entire continent. No matter which force they were from, the powerhouses of the continent all joined this organization called the Assembly. Even the weakest member of the council was a saint-level expert. In other words, once one reached the saint level, one would automatically gain the qualifications to be a member of the council and be called a member of the council. Being a senator was the highest honor in the Noah continent. To obtain this honor, one had to have the strength of a divine domain expert. They were the most powerful people in the Noah continent. These members of the archipelago held a joint conference every 10 years to discuss the important matters of the continent. These archipelago senators and sacred domain senators were like the helmsmen that decided the fate of the Noah continent. They held the highest authority in the Noah continent. The archipelago was mainly composed of the magical beast clan. There were a total of 7 senators who had the strength of a divine domain. There were 7 seats, 5 of which were magical beasts. The beastmen and elves each had 1 seat. The 5 senators had 1 seat, the chairman and vice chairman. The chairman was from the dragons, while the vice chairman was from the dragons, and the vice chairman was from the Beaumont clan. They were all powerful magical beasts with noble bloodlines. The sacred domain senators had 446 seats. The magical beasts had the most seats, with 272. The beastmen and elves were about the same, with 67 seats for the beastmen and elves, 65 for the elves, and 42 for the humans. It was a large, circular conference room with over 400 seats. With the center as the center, the room continued to expand outwards. The God Realm experts, who were the senators, sat in the center, while the Saint Realm experts sat in the outer circle. There were all kinds of races in the conference, but they were all in human form. The human seats were on the side. Because there were fewer of them, they didn't stand out. The Noah Continent's Pope, Ernst, and the Balarax Academy's head prats were sitting on the seats. At this time, a voice came from a door. The Noah Continent's Senate Conference has begun. Now, let's welcome the chairman, vice chairman, and 2 senators. The chairman is here. As soon as the voice of the attendant fell, it caused a commotion among the people. They all wanted to see the chairman. At this time, a figure leisurely walked over. She was wearing a long purple dress that dragged on the ground. A white and expensive fur coat tightly wrapped around her curvaceous body. Her golden hair was slightly curled. Her hands that were as smooth as cream parted the hair in front of her forehead, revealing a pair of beautiful azure blue eyes. Her face was wrapped in a thin veil, giving her an indescribably noble and elegant appearance. The one who came was the chairman of the Noah Continent, Frigga from the dragons of the magical beast clan. Her peerless beauty made many people fall head over heels for her. Frigga wasn't used to people paying attention to her beauty, so she covered her face with a veil. Many of the sacred domain experts lost their self-control and rushed to see the chairman's face. However, they were disappointed. No matter how they tried to pry, it was like they encountered an invisible wall. They couldn't find anything. A thought appeared in their minds. The chairman was unfathomable. Behind her was a lean old man. He was wearing a black robe. His half-closed eyelids emitted a faint light. He was the patriarch of the dragons, Dark Dragon Firth R.A. He was also the vice chairman of the joint conference. The other person's age couldn't be determined, but he had a sturdy body and was 2 meters tall. He was the great elder of the Beaumont clan, and the only Beaumont behemoth Hao Qin. He was also the vice chairman of the joint conference. Following closely behind, several experts of the sacred domain also entered the hall with Chairman Frigga. Among them was the high priestess of the elf clan, nature magic god Undine. There was also the beast god of the Beastman clan, Minotaur War godly Jia. Frigga walked to the chairman's seat in the middle. She gently lifted her robe and sat down gracefully. The 2 chairmen and 4 senators also sat in their respective seats. At this time, some of the senators started to discuss. No way. She is the chairman? Isn't the chairman the patriarch of the dragons, Lord R.A. Firth R.A.? How come as an unknown girl? You are ignorant. 5 years ago, Lord Frigga had already taken over the position of chairman. She is also from the dragons, but she is not well known. Dark Dragon R.A. Firth R.A. felt that he was old, so he let Frigga, who is also a dragon, take over the position. That can't be. The position of chairman can be taken over so casually. It is fine for us senators, but would the senators and the vice chairman agree? I don't know. As for Chairman Frigga, she definitely has the strength of a sacred domain. The strength of a sacred domain. Ernst of the Holy See sat at the side and quietly listened to the discussions around him. He muttered, "The talents of the dragons are really terrifying. She's already a sacred domain at such a young age." Ernst sat at a corner far away. Although he had a high position in the Holy Roman Empire, in the joint conference, he was nothing. There were many who were stronger than him, and the human race did not have a high position in the joint conference. Prats, Montegot, King of Assassins, Hill, and the others sat together. There is also the water mage of the Roland Empire, St. Mise. The strong warriors of the Holy Roman Empire and the Roland Empire were clearly separated. When they looked at each other, their faces were filled with disdain. At this time, Montegot laughed and said, "The strong warrior of the Holy See, His Highness Geo, is here." "Oh no, why is there one less?" Hill laughed and said, "I heard it too. According to the Holy See, a strong warrior of the sacred domain was killed by an unknown person. I don't know if it is true or not." The old man laughed and looked at Prats. It seemed that he had already heard a lot of news. Prats looked down. Although Ron had already confessed everything to him, in this kind of situation, if he did not want to attract hatred, staying silent was the best choice. "No way." Montegot was shocked. Then who could it be? Could it be a new strong warrior of the sacred domain? He really did not know. "I'm not too sure about this." Hill laughed and said, "Maybe Dean Prats can explain it to me." "Really?" Montego looked over, and the surrounding experts of the Roland Empire also looked over with inquisitive gazes. "Hill, this guy?" Prats smiled bitterly in his heart. He shook his head and deliberately coughed, pretending to be ignorant. If even Sir Hill doesn't know about it, then it is even more impossible for me to know." "Oh." The human warriors of the sacred domain looked disappointed. However, most of them were people with sharp eyes. Prats and Hill definitely knew something, but they did not want to reveal it. "TSK. Boring." Hill curled his lips in dissatisfaction and made a disdainful gesture. He looked in the direction of the strong warriors of the Holy See with a smile on his face. Their conversation fell into the ears of the people of the Holy See without missing a word. Holy Priest Imina and Holy Knight Boulder looked over angrily, and Hill, who was gloating, felt his hair stand on end. Hill shrugged innocently and spread his hands. "What does this have to do with me? Okay, let's prepare for the meeting." Chapter 296. Who is Ron? At this moment, La Firth spoke up. As everyone knows, since the day the Assembly was established, its purpose was to jointly deal with the important issues of the entire continent. It is a platform to promote communication between the strong, reduce friction, and resolve grievances. It is to work hard to maintain the peace of the entire continent. Now, let us begin the official discussion. After that, La Firth smiled and turned to the senators and asked, "Dear senators, do you have any questions?" According to the convention of the Assembly, the senators' questions would be placed first, and the senators' questions would be dealt with later. La Firth's gaze swept across the faces of the senators one by one. All of the senators shook their heads, indicating that they had no questions to be dealt with in the Assembly. At this moment, Undine stood up and said with a serious face, "Lord Speaker, Lord Vice Speaker, Senators, I have a matter that needs to be dealt with in the Assembly." "Senator, please," La Firth said with a pleasant expression. "Thank you, Lord Vice Speaker." Undine smiled. As everyone knows, the senators and senators are the pinnacle of the continent. With a wave of your hand, You could destroy a city. It is precisely because we have the power that surpasses everything that we should respect life and reduce hatred. We should also be more careful with our words and actions and restrain ourselves. At this moment, she changed her tone. However, one of our counselors seems to have violated some of the rules of the continent. 2 years ago, just 2 years ago, one of our elven villages was attacked by an unknown force. The elves in the village suffered heavy casualties, and the young elves were kidnapped and tortured to death. The whole incident was horrifying. Later on, after much investigation, I found out that it was the work of the sacred domain powerhouses of the Cloud Shadow Leopard clan from the kingdom of demonic beasts. Undine's eyes moved. "May I ask, Lord Hinchcliffe, is there such a thing?" Undine turned slightly and stared at the skinny middle-aged man sitting behind her. Her gaze was cold, and traces of killing intent filled the air. The spearhead was directed at Hinchcliffe. The anger of a sacred domain powerhouse could not be concealed. The one called Hinchcliffe was a Cloud Shadow Leopard. His body was a huge leopard. At this moment, he was sweating profusely and fidgeting uneasily. He was the one who planned and participated in this incident. Back then, when he passed by the elf village, he saw the beautiful elves playing in the water and couldn't help but commit a big mistake. He thought that no one would know about it. 2 years had passed, but he didn't know that Undine found out about it and dug it out. After hearing that, Raffield raised his head slightly and asked, "Hinchcliffe, is that true?" "No." Hinchcliffe sprung up abruptly as he roared furiously, "Mr. President, that's a blatant slander. Lady Undine, I did it. Do you have any evidence?" None of the people present were stupid. When they saw Hinchcliffe, they felt that he was a coward. They didn't believe that a sacred domain powerhouse would take the initiative to slander a sacred domain powerhouse. Undine smiled slightly. "Don't forget, I'm a nature archmage. The trees won't lie. From a moment you kidnapped the elves and where you tortured and killed them, the trees have told me everything. Although there was no direct evidence, this was enough. The words of a sacred domain powerhouse were the evidence." At this moment, the entire conference hall was silent. There was a hint of suffocation in the air. "Damn it!" A cold voice came from the seat of honor in the middle of the hall. The speaker was none other than Council Head Freja. She had already announced Hinchcliffe's death sentence with a single sentence. Hinchcliffe was already lying on the ground, trembling all over. However, he was still arguing, "This is not fair. What kind of evidence is this?" Firth pondered for a moment, then slowly said, "Perhaps the evidence is not enough, but it doesn't matter. It won't be too late to interrogate him after we detain him." He raised his voice. "Which powerhouse is on duty today? Detain this guy and lock him up in the Blackstone prison, yes." A few powerhouses responded, got up, and walked towards Hinchcliffe. "Lord Hinchcliffe, please don't make things difficult for us." A few sacred domain powerhouses walked up to him and said, if they detained him for investigation, Hinchcliffe would most likely not be able to escape. He knew that he was going to die, so he gritted his teeth. His father is a sacred domain powerhouse. Why would I need to endure this kind of humiliation? As long as I escape, there's no place for me in the continent of Noah. Thinking of this, Hinchcliffe's power trembled and exploded. Amidst the exclamations of the crowd, he revealed the true form of the Shadow Cloud Leopard. His 4 limbs suddenly jumped, and his slender body turned into a black shadow and fled like lightning. Everyone knew very well that the words "fleeing for fear of punishment" had firmly locked onto him. Damn it! A trace of anger appeared in Undine's eyes. She was about to make a move, and her life force was quickly condensing. However, there was a power that was faster than her. A bright light flashed in the conference hall, and Hinchcliffe let out a miserable cry. In the dazzling light, his body was annihilated in an instant, and there was not even a trace of him left. For a moment, everyone was silent. Shocking. Everyone in the conference hall was stunned by this terrifying power. The terrifying thing about this power was its control. It could kill a sacred domain powerhouse silently, and not even the bystanders were alerted. This power was enough to shock everyone present. Undine's eyes focused. She turned around and bowed. "Thank you, Lord President." It was President Frigga who made the move. She waved her hand lightly. "It's nothing. His escape is enough to explain everything. This matter is over. Now, let's talk about the next matter." "Yes, Lord President." Lawfirth looked at Frigga, and there was a trace of smile on his face. Now, no one dared to look down on the young president anymore. She indeed had power that others could not hope to reach. Under the pressure of President Frigga's powerful strength, the conference proceeded smoothly. "There are sacred domain beasts wreaking havoc on the west coast of Andalis. Should we eliminate them?" "Yes. Immediately send out sacred domain powerhouses to eliminate them. If necessary, send out divine domain powerhouses." "Lord President, there are some conflicts between the Orc Empire and the Berserk Wolf clan of the Demonic Beast Empire. Should we mediate?" "Yes, Beaumont clan Senator Hao Qin will mediate." The atmosphere became lively, and the issues in the conference were resolved one by one. In the end, Lawfirth asked, "What about the humans? Do the humans have any issues that need to be resolved?" At this time, Lawfirth finally asked about the humans. Ernst stood up abruptly and said coldly, "Lord President, I want to report Ron of the Roland Empire. He ignored the relevant rules of the conference and brazenly killed a sacred domain powerhouse of the Holy See. In addition, I also want to report Prats of the Roland Empire's Balarax Academy for harboring the criminal Ron and trying to prevent us from taking revenge. Killed a sacred domain powerhouse?" Everyone was shocked. It was not easy to kill a sacred domain powerhouse without any reason. Many people thought that this guy named Ron was most likely dead, or at least imprisoned in the Blackstone prison. "Ron?" Frigga frowned slightly. Lawfirth felt a little strange. Frigga had not said a word during the conference, except for killing Hinchcliffe, the Shadow Cloud Leopard. Why did she suddenly mention this name? Frigga also felt a little strange. She felt that she had some kind of connection with this guy named Ron. It was a very mysterious intuition. Hey. Ernst, can't you tell the truth?" The King of Assassins, Hill, shouted in dissatisfaction. "It was clearly your sacred domain powerhouse who chased after him. Do you think he would just stand there and let you kill him? Or maybe he would just resist?" Ernst's eyes were cold. He did not want to be entangled with Hill on this issue. So he continued, "Mr. Chairman, the dead cannot be brought back. I don't have anything else to ask. We only have one request, and that is for the Roland Empire to hand over Ron or stop protecting him. Our blood feud must be avenged. Otherwise, I will gather all the powerhouses in the Holy See and the army of the Holy Roman Empire to fight the Roland Empire to the death. At that time, we will be plunged into an abyss of misery and suffering." Ernst's hunched body straightened. His eyes were fierce, and his words were threatening. Monty got snorted coldly. "Who are you threatening? Do you think we are afraid of you?" "You." Boulder suddenly stood up, and a fierce light flashed in his eyes. "You what? Come at me if you have the guts." Monty did not show any weakness. He stood up and confronted Boulder. For a moment, the powerhouses of the Roland Empire and the Holy Roman Empire stood up. Both sides glared at each other, and it looked like a battle was about to break out. Some of the powerhouses of the Roland Empire also stood up. This matter might not have anything to do with them, but at this moment, they could only brace themselves and stand up. For example, the water mage, St. Mise. The powerhouses of the other races crossed their arms and smiled, watching the internal strife of the humans. Lawfirth frowned and coldly reprimanded. "What's wrong? Are you all ready to fight? Do you have something to say? What do you humans think the assembly hall is? All of you sit down." When the Holy Roman Empire and the Roland Empire heard this, they could only sit down. However, they were still indignant. Pornographic novels Lawfirth's expression eased a little. Arguing and fighting will not solve the problem. However, killing a powerhouse of the sacred domain is not a simple matter. I think we should let the person involved come out and clarify the matter. "That guy called Ron, which force is he from?" Lawfirth asked coldly. His gaze swept across the faces of all the powerhouses of the sacred domain. No one made a sound. Everyone was silent. Seeing that no one answered, Lawfirth's expression became a little unhappy. His face darkened. You have the guts to kill, but you don't have the guts to come out? I'll ask again, who is Ron? Still, no one made a sound. Lawfirth felt a little embarrassed. He suddenly turned his head and looked at a powerhouse of the dragons of the sacred domain behind him. That powerhouse of the dragons of the sacred domain naturally understood what he meant. He flipped through the pieces in his hand and shook his head. Lord Patriarch, I've checked the list of names. There is no such person as Ron in the assembly. What? This time, it was Lawfirth's turn to be surprised. There is no such person? He's a newly promoted powerhouse of the sacred domain. A newly promoted powerhouse of the sacred domain actually killed a sacred domain powerhouse who had been famous for a long time. This was a huge matter. Usually, this newly promoted powerhouse of the sacred domain would have a talent that ordinary people could not hope to reach. Hee, Lord Vice Chairman. At this moment, Hill laughed. Dean Platts should know better. I'll let him do it. Lawfirth looked at Platts. Platts stood up awkwardly and bowed. Lord Vice Chairman, this Ron is a student of our academy. Furthermore, he is not a powerhouse of the sacred domain. Chapter 297. Everyone had an expression of disbelief on their faces. How could someone who wasn't from the sacred domain kill someone from the sacred domain? How was that possible? When Raphael heard this, his face was full of disbelief. Platts, are you joking? Umph. At this moment, Pope Ernst let out a cold snort. Lord Roughfield, the reason why this guy called Ron killed Wharton was because he trained in evil necromancy magic. Moreover, this evil power doesn't belong to him. He's a heretic. Lawfirth stared blankly. What? Necromancy magic? He had naturally heard rumors of necromancy magic. Wasn't necromancy magic notorious for being trash? Objection. Pratt stood up and said loudly, Lord Vice Chairman, our Roland Empire has never had heretical magic. He took a deep breath and said, the existence of any power has its own logic. Necromancy magic is the same. Although some of its actions seem inconceivable, it doesn't mean that it's evil. He glanced at Ernst. On the contrary, the Holy See calls all powers that don't conform to their teachings heresy. When Ron was in the Holy Roman Empire, they sent troops to hunt him down. In the end, they even mobilized experts from the sacred domain. Such actions are unreasonable in my opinion. Ernst sneered. Dean Prats, can you tell me Ron's true strength now? Prats hesitated for a moment. Although I don't know much about necromancy magic, from what I know, with his current cultivation speed, I estimate that he's around master rank, master level. This level of strength made everyone present feel disdain and disdain. It's good that you admit it. Ernst took a deep breath and suddenly turned around. Lord Vice Chairman, Lord Lawfirth, it's extremely unreasonable for a master rank expert to kill a sacred domain expert. This was only possible because this heretic named Ron sacrificed a corpse. He used some special method to allow a corpse from the sacred domain to possess its former strength and control it in battle. That's how he was able to kill Wharton, controlling a corpse? Everyone in the assembly looked at each other. They had never heard of such a method of using power. Beastman Senator Licka frowned. You're saying that Ron doesn't possess the strength of a sacred domain expert at all. Instead, he used the strength of the sacred domain expert? Licka Ernst. That's right. Lawfirth asked, Prats is... That's right. Prats nodded. Lord Firth, but I still think that the existence of this kind of power is reasonable. No matter what method Ron uses, as long as he wins, it's fine. Even us sacred domain experts do everything we can to obtain power. What's wrong with that? The two's views were fiercely clashing. Both sides insisted on their own views and refused to back down. They were about to quarrel. Undine, one of the senators, frowned. She finally knew who this Ron was. If she guessed correctly, this Ron was the same person as the Ron that Aurora spoke of. This guy really can't stop. Undine sighed her heart. A master-level expert actually caused all the experts of the continent to quarrel over him. In the history of the continent, He was probably the only one who could do this. Everyone knew that the matter was actually very simple. However, Firth couldn't make a decision. It wasn't clear who was right and who was wrong in this matter. Both sides had their own views, and each of them sounded reasonable. Firth helplessly said, "I don't know what to do about this either. Let's discuss it." The assembly hall was filled with buzzing sounds. All the experts were discussing. Some supported Pratt's view, some supported Ernst's view. However, most of them were still in a playful mood. Other than the experts of the Holy Roman Empire and the Roman Empire, no one took it seriously. Monty got grinned at Pratt's. That Ron is the guy who led the students into the Soaring Dragon Academy, right? He actually killed Warden? It's really interesting. Pratt's bitterly smiled and said in a low voice, "That battle puppet, you have seen it too. Did you forget that headless monster in the sky above the Balarax Academy?" "That's it." Monty was stunned. He immediately nodded. If it was that headless corpse, killing Wharton shouldn't be a problem. Monty still had lingering fear when he recalled the terrifying strength of the headless corpse. Hill smiled. "I have seen Ron before. His ability to control corpses is unfathomable. When the Earth Sword St. Chris attacked, he also used the same move. At that time, I suspected that the headless guy was created by him. If that was a headless monster, then Chris would have died in your academy. I still have to thank you for that matter. If it wasn't for you, how could it be settled so easily?" Pratt sighed. I have a premonition that things will develop in a bad direction." "Hill, what do you think about this matter?" Hill smiled. "Don't worry, I will be on your side." Monty also smiled. "Old geezer, when have I ever not supported you?" While everyone was discussing, Firth quietly asked Chairman Frigga, "Chairman, this matter," Frigga shook her head, "I have no objections." "I understand." Firth nodded. He knew that Frigga didn't want to get involved in this matter. At this moment, the temple master of the Holy See's Atonement Hall, Priest Imina, suddenly stood up. "Chairman, Vice Chairman, Senator, I would like to say something." The conference hall quieted down. Everyone's eyes turned to her. Imina took a deep breath and said, "I would like to remind everyone of a fact. The most powerful, evil, and terrifying aspect of necromancy is that it can control corpses to fight." Her beautiful eyes wandered, and her voice reverberated through the conference hall like an aureole. Then everyone can imagine this scenario. No one's life is unlimited. If after you die, these evil heretics control your corpses to do some illegal things, what would you think? As soon as Imina's words fell, the entire conference hall went into an uproar. Everyone's face carried a trace of indignation. Perhaps they were all-powerful experts in the past, but after death, they had become corpses at the mercy of others. This kind of change was something they couldn't accept no matter what. That's all I have to say. Imina understood the principle of not overdoing it. She obediently accepted it and immediately sat down. At this moment, she saw Ernst give her a look of approval. She nodded her head lightly. After Imina's words, the atmosphere in the conference hall changed. Many people began to righteously rebuke necromancy, this kind of evil magic. At this moment, another expert of the Beaumont clan who had been silent all this time, another vice chairman, spoke up. Once he spoke, everyone's attention was drawn to him. "This Ron has the evil power to control corpses, and there's no need for him to remain in this world. I suggest that the conference form a joint enforcement team to carry out this matter." Hao Qin's words were sonorous and forceful, making the final decision. As the vice chairman, he had clearly stated his opinion. If the other senators didn't object, then the matter had already been decided. The vice chairman is wise. Ernst bowed deeply, a trace of joy on his face. Firth asked, "Senators, do you have any other opinions?" Undine pondered for a moment, thinking about the pornographic novel. Ron, you stinking brat, you actually dare to bully my precious grandson. Since that's the case, don't blame me for not helping you." "I have no objections." The other senators also shook their heads, indicating that they had no objections. Pratt, Montego, Hill, and the others looked at each other, their eyes filled with helplessness. Pratt's heart sank. He smiled bitterly and asked Hill, "Can this matter still be salvaged?" Hill's face was also filled with bitterness. "I'm afraid not." When Firth looked at Chairman Frigga, Frigga hesitated for a moment. "The conference shouldn't interfere in this matter. Let the human race deal with it themselves." In the Razor Highlands in the southwest of the Kingdom of Magical Beasts, it was the territory of the noble Beaumont clan. On the boundless plains, a huge, rough building that looked like a castle stood on the ground. The outside of the castle was so rough and simple, but the inside of the castle was luxuriously decorated. In a wide corridor, a handsome man was anxiously waiting. He kept pacing back and forth, but his eyes kept glancing at the tightly shut door. His face was filled with anxiety. He was the illegitimate son of the Holy See's Sacred Domain powerhouse, Warden of the Hall of Piety, Tommy. Ever since Wharton's death, without the protection of a powerhouse, Tommy's status plummeted. Due to his inability to eliminate the rebels, the Imperial Army suffered heavy casualties. Tommy had to bear the responsibility. He was removed from his position as the governor of the Abia province and almost lost his title of nobility in the empire. However, Tommy was someone who was good at seizing opportunities. He grabbed the last straw in his life at all costs, the powerhouse of the Beaumont clan, Omega. In order to move Omega's heart, he traveled thousands of miles to the Razor Highlands of the Kingdom of Magical Beasts. He gave her exquisite gifts and sweet words of love, and finally succeeded in capturing Omega's heart. At this moment, the door opened, and Omega walked out quickly. "How was it?" Tommy quickly walked up to her, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Omega's ugly face had a look of passionate love. She smiled and said, "It's done. With the old ancestor support, Ron will definitely not be able to escape the fate of being killed." "That's great." Tommy's eyes shone with the light of revenge. He said hatefully, "Ron, you will also have such a day, Omega. Thank you." Tommy said sincerely. Omega smiled. "What are you thanking me for? This Ron has a grudge against me too. Don't forget that I almost died in his hands." Sighing softly, Tommy looked at this ugly girl and felt touched. Ever since he experienced the ups and downs of the world, Tommy had matured a lot. He pulled Omega into his arms and whispered, "Omega, I have nothing left. Don't leave me." That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.